special meeting of the San Diego Union High School District Board of Trustees. This meeting is being held in accordance with the State of California Executive Orders N2920 and N3320 and Public Health Officer Regulations issued on April 10th, 2020. This meeting is being conducted virtually. I, Beth Hergesheimer, Board President, and Trustees Joyce D'Alessandro, Kristen Gibson, Melise Mossy, and Mo Muir are participating remotely. Public comments at the special board meetings are restricted to items on the agenda for board consideration action. The protocol for receiving public comments was posted with the agenda. The public was given the opportunity to submit a request to address the board and submit written comments prior to the start of the meeting. All of the public comments received were shared with the Board of Trustees earlier today for their review, and all of these public comments are posted online. This meeting's being live streamed and video recorded. I'd like to ask everyone in attendance at the moment to make sure that you're currently muted, and then join me in saying the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Excuse me, Beth, someone just texted me and said that they couldn't get online. Could you ask Joel if there's an issue? Thank you.
All right, I'll hope maybe they can contact Joel or Joe. We'll see what we can do. All right, so
If you could hold on 1 second, Board
I
President.
will do that. Sure.
Ms. Hergesheimer,
Yes.
the link is posted on the website at www.sduhsd.net. And if they're having issues, they need to refresh.
All right, and we can see that other people have been able to join or,
Yeah.
or observe. Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. All right, to start with, I need a motion to approve the agenda of July 30th, 2020 special board meeting of San Diego Union High School District as presented.
So moved, Muir.
Thank you.
Okay, Mossy.
Thank you. Do I have any questions or comments before we do a roll call? Roll call, please, then, Ms. Schultz.
Ms. D'Alessandro,
Unmute, please.
Yes.
Ms. Gibson,
Yes.
Ms. Mossy,
Yes.
Ms. Muir,
Yes.
Meeting, I'm only hearing little bits of what people are saying. And there's no interference. Nobody else is on a device in my house. And I have a feeling it's the ThinkPad. I don't know what else to think.
All right, maybe if we could ask Mr. Van Heuser to maybe check in with you. Shall we go?
we will.
Okay, and I
And-
will,
The last person is Ms.
Okay,
Hergesheimer.
yes,
Thank
yes,
you.
on the agenda. Thank you.
Yeah.
All right, can we maybe mute Ms. D'Alessandro so she can talk to Joel if she needs to? And I am going to go ahead and move forward and let us take public comment while we work to get that cleared up. First, we have consideration of adoption of resolutions, of which there are 2. And we will now hear public comment on this item. In accordance with Government Code 5495.3 and Board Policy 9323, spoken comments will be limited to 2 minutes per speaker and a total of 20 minutes. Comments must address the action before the board for consideration. When your name is called, you'll be unmuted and have 2 minutes to provide your spoken comment. And I'll go ahead and read 2 names at a time so that you know you're coming up. Our first speaker, we have 4 on this, is Marianne Grosner, and she'll be followed by Angelina.
Hi, good afternoon. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening, board members. I'd like to make a comment on the levy of special taxes for the 2021 fiscal year. The public, and in particular parents of special needs students, would appreciate some transparency when it comes to special education spending of our taxpayer dollars, especially in light of tax increases. I've attended dozens of school board meetings across Southern California, and one thing I've noticed is that other districts seem to have a lot more transparency. I've spoken about this at your previous board meetings. I mentioned the example of a special education department in Riverside County and highlighted to the board what information that special ed department had shared with its community. I'd like to reiterate this type of information could be helpful for members of our community to better understand how our taxpayer dollars are being spent in special education at San Dieguito. That district's May presentation highlighted how much was spent on legal issues to include settlement agreements and legal fees from 2016 to 2020. They highlighted the number of occurrences of CDE complaints and due processes over the years, how many IEE or independent educational evaluations were done each year. They even listed the law firms they use specifically for special education, et cetera. This allowed the public to better understand where their taxpayer dollars were being spent. During the June 6, 2020 board meeting, Dr. Haley, Ms. Muir, and Ms. Mossy discussed creating a comparison sheet of the legal rates of special education law firms used by San Dieguito. So I was wondering if that had been completed. While a comparison sheet is the start, greater transparency can foster a much larger trust with the public. As a taxpayer and resident in Trustee Area 5, I'd like to ask that the district be more transparent by providing the public with a breakdown of special education spending at a future board meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Angelina, who will be followed by Rita Loof.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Go ahead, please.
Thank you. I want to discuss the fact that San Dieguito is authorizing the board to increase special tax when they continue to use taxpayer dollars to fight parent after parent for services. You continue to use high-paid law firms to charge up to almost $360 an hour for their services. Are you able to be transparent in where and how the increase in taxes will be spent? I want to ask that with this approval, will our taxpayer dollar continue to be used to pay a law firm to deny services when with that money, several services could have been provided to our children with IEPs? Why as parents do we have to fight for everything? Why do we have to fight for services, for proper evaluations, and for our kids, for our voices to be heard? Districts rather fight a parent using taxpayer dollars for services and spend twice the amount of money than actually help a child. They send out private investigators to our homes. They send out third parties who are supposed to be neutral and are actually lawyers working for the district. They drag out issues, neglect our kids, and do nothing. And do everything to silence our voice. I ask the board to be more transparent to the parents and community in regards to how taxpayer dollars are being spent. Also, please support your parents and provide more education and less litigation. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Rita Loof, followed by Dana Kozlaitis.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Go ahead, please.
Thank you. I wanted to support the San Dieguito parents regarding this increase in taxation. And we always hear that special education children are high cost, but what we don't hear is where the money is actually going. As we know, the current virus crisis is having a financial impact on the district's budget, on every district's budget, and your board will have to make difficult decisions and even be more vigilant about how you're spending our education tax dollars. One area the district's budget that needs to be looked at is special education. We hear about the high cost of special education, but a large amount of money is going to litigation rather than providing services for students. Please request a full accounting of how San Dieguito's special education department is spending San Dieguito tax dollars before you burden the community with yet another tax that will most likely not go into the classroom, but will go into the courtroom. In my own personal experience, my district spent $124,000 almost in a month period, and $0 to actually provide services. So the money that we're collecting for taxes is not really going to its intended use. And at the end of the day, our children get blamed for being high cost and for impacting the district's budget, which is a misrepresentation of the facts. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. And lastly, it's Dana Kislaitis.
Good evening. Can you hear me?
You are good to go, please.
Okay, good evening. Speaking about the levy of taxes, taxpayers need to be aware how taxes have been spent at district. San Dieguito has a long history of litigating students with disabilities. Students who are in special education have legal agreements for their education. The legal agreement is called an Independent Education Plan, an IEP. General education students don't have a legal agreement with district, only students with disabilities. Special education operates in the red, and that is why district uses law firms to fight services for students with disabilities. It's cheaper to fight with lawyers than to provide students services. A former superintendent told me that this is big business for the law firms. The lawyers at the firms are profiting with our taxpayer dollars from families who struggle with students with disabilities. To look at cases that have been brought in front of a judge in the name of the special education administrators at San Dieguito who have attended trials, Google Office of Administrative Hearings, Special Education, then select Search the Decision Database. Type in San Dieguito Union High School. You will find cases that the district has used with our taxpayer dollars paying private law firms who fight, not support students with disabilities. I would bet that none of the lawyers in the firms have a child with the disabilities. In January of 2020, San Dieguito used the highest hourly paid law firm in a litigation against a student with disabilities. The district special education director and 2 attorneys from Dennis Wolvery Kelly attended the trial against the vulnerable student with disabilities. You can find this is a public document, and you can find the document in the search and do a public records request for the cost of the trial. Before paying any special additional taxes, do some research about litigation against special ed students at San Dieguito Union.
Thank you. Your time is up, but thank you for your comments. All right, this brings us to our first of our 2 resolutions, which is establishing special taxes for the 2020-21 fiscal year. So may I have a motion to adopt the resolutions establishing special taxes within community facilities districts number 94-2, 94-3, 95-2, 99-1, 99-2, 99-3, and 031, which increase the alternate prepayment tax for single-family, multifamily units and commercial buildings per the annual Sierra West Group Material Cost of Construction Index or Engineering News Record Building Cost Index as presented.
So moved. Muir.
Thank you.
Second, Gibson.
All right, thank you. It's been moved and seconded. Are there any further questions or comments?
One from Aussie.
Go ahead, please.
Would you be so kind, we've had time to read over the document, we voted on this previously, but would you be so kind to just in layman's terms, explain what we're voting on and why we're voting on it, just so the public understands as well?
Thank you.
In case they don't.
Dr. Haley, do you want to do that or direct that to Ms.
Well,
Douglas? or-
see Superintendent Douglas, give a brief explanation.
So ultimately, this first resolution is to allow us to levy taxes. And if you guys recall and know, we have a school financing authority that meets quarterly that was established. These CFDs were established in many different timeframes, some of them back into 1996, and ultimately, therefore, supporting facility growth when developers come in and develop homes or even commercial. And so the dollars that are provided to the district with these levies actually pays for the bonds that were taken out at the time that this was approved in its original sense to help us with our facility expansion to support the additional students that come in. None of the dollars are used for anything other than facilities.
Thank you, Ms. Douglas. Does that address your question, Ms. Mossy? All right, thank you. If there are no further questions or comments, I'd ask Ms. Schultz to call the roll call, please.
Ms. D'Alessandro? Is that a yes?
Yes, he's muted.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Gibson?
Yes.
Ms. Mossy?
Yes.
Ms. Muir?
Yes.
Ms. Hergesheimer?
Yes. Thank you. The next items are, I'm looking for a motion to adopt the resolutions levying special taxes with community facilities districts numbers 94-1, 94-2, 94-3, 95-1, 95-2, 99-1, 99-2, 99-3, and 0-3-1, and authorize the auditor of San Diego County to levy taxes on all non-exempt property within each community facilities district as presented. May I have a motion, please?
So moved.
D'Alessandro.
Okay, I heard Ms. Muir and Ms. D'Alessandro.
Yes, either way, Beth, it's fine.
Thank you. Are there any further questions regarding this item? Seeing none, I am going to ask Ms. Schultz to call the roll again.
Ms. D'Alessandro?
Yes.
Ms. Gibson?
Yes.
Ms. Mossy?
Yes.
Ms. Muir?
Yes.
Ms. Hergesheimer?
Yes. Thank you very much. This brings us to our item number 3, which is consideration and action regarding the 2020-2021 academic year reopening of schools consistent with the California Department of Public Health mandate guidelines and the San Diego County Public Health Order. We will now hear public comments on this item. We received a total of 33 written comments and 10 requests to speak in accordance with Government Code 5495.3 and Board Policy 9323. Spoken comments will be limited to 2 minutes per speaker. And again, as your name is called, you'll be unmuted and have 2 minutes for your comment, and I will try to keep reading 2 names at a time. The first name is Daniel Paul, who will be followed by Chris C. Durand.
Hello?
Yes, you can go ahead, please.
Thank you. I am commenting in regards to the distance learning and the potential for students to take advantage of programs outside of SDSU for a semester. It is my understanding that the board's policy is that if a student leaves for a semester and comes back the following semester, they're not allowed to return. Given these unusual circumstances with the coronavirus pandemic, I would think it would be in the students and the school's best interest to allow students to explore different forms of learning if distance learning isn't necessarily the best in their best interests.
All right, thank you very much. Next is Chris Durand, who will be followed by Jacqueline Carney.
Ms. Hergesheimer?
Yes.
Chris Durand did not check in.
All right. Did Miss Carney check in?
Ms. Carney will not be speaking.
All right. That brings me to the next 2 will be a Brian Shea and Joe Shea, but they are spelled differently.
Hi there, this is Brian Shea. Thank you all for listening and making the challenging decisions ahead of you. I've been teaching math in our school district for nearly 20 years. I strongly suggest that you adopt the proposal to start the school year on time and virtually for at least the first quarter. Trust me, I want to go back to my classroom and teach my students daily. but it cannot be done safely given the health orders, government mandates, and the rapid spread of the virus. Please don't delay the start of the school as some districts have decided to do. We need to have our students get back to learning as soon as possible so we can mitigate any learning loss. I would also advise you to consider having all schools operate on a 3x3 or a 3x4 or a 4x4 schedule to minimize student and staff class loads. I spent the month of July on the Teaching and Learning Task Force, where we investigated multiple models for returning to school. And I could assure you that the community and that every option for returning to school was thoroughly explored and discussed, including virtual schools, concurrent schools, and a hybrid school model. The virtual model planned for this year will be significantly more robust than what happened in the spring. The proposed bell schedule set for the stage for the daily live teaching and learning for students. And the professional learning we'll be getting this month will help us directly create dynamic virtual learning environments for all students. And finally, when it's safe to return to face instruction, I implore you to err on the side of caution. The potential to have the repeatedly close and reopen school due to illnesses, be them on campus or in the community, is disruptive to the learning and emotional health of the student system. Again, base your decisions on science and the safety of students, staff, and the community. The rush to reopen businesses and the lack of people wearing PPEs leading to the rapid increase and the spread of this disease. So please, thank you again for taking the time and listening.
Thank you, Mr. Shea. Next is Joe Shea, who will be followed by Allison Stratton.
Okay, can you hear me?
Go ahead, please.
Great, thank you, board members. My name is Joe Shea. I've been teaching at San Diego Union High School District for over 20 years at San Diego Academy, Oak Crest, and Canyon Crest Academy. I'm proud of my district and I brag about it to teacher friends and anyone else who will listen. It's my opinion that it's not safe for students or staff to return to school this fall, even voluntarily. People who say that teenagers are not at risk are often looking at the stats for California, where teens haven't been in school for 4 months, rather than at places where the disease appeared while school is in session. Although it's more dangerous to us staff members, it's not safe for our students either, whether or not their parents want them to go to school. It's difficult to go against the wishes of parents, but sometimes it's the right thing to do. I would also like you to consider that teachers have not been asked what they would do if they were asked to come back to work and did not believe that it was safe to do so. No doubt some would retire early or ask for a leave or even quit if they thought that their health was being compromised. During the best of times, we have difficulties attracting substitutes who are qualified to teach the subject, especially with some of the cutting-edge curricula that our district is spearheading. Since many substitutes are older than the average teacher, there may even be a few of them who will gamble, there may be even fewer of them who will gamble with their health. It would be sad to simply babysit students when we have the infrastructure available to teach them remotely. At the risk of repeating what everyone must be thinking, there are no great options. I respectfully urge you to follow the recommendations of the leadership of our district and make distance learning the only option for the first quarter of the 2020-2021 school year. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Shea. Next is Allison Stratton, followed by Megan Ratliff.
Thank you. As a parent with a child in the school, he's a rising junior who has been out and about. You know, I have an actual knowledge of how our kids are behaving in the community. It's not guesses. I also am a contact tracer for San Diego County, so I spend the entire day talking to sick people on the phone and have an intimate knowledge of how the disease is tracking in our community. The reality is we have a very, very low disease rate in our district, which this high school district serves. So what I'm asking for you guys to do is, it was interesting to hear Brian Shea speak about how much work had been done over the summer about distance learning. The parents don't know any of this. We're not hearing any of the work that you guys have put in to making distance learning better than it was in the spring. Frankly, it was truly terrible. And we need to know what your plans are for distance learning now, because we can't escape it. And then when we will be able to reopen, because we will be able to reopen, so maybe sooner. Our disease rates are dropping. The last report was 282 cases. We need to get to 240 cases a day for the next 14 days in order to trigger a reopening. So that may come sooner rather than later. And we'd like to know what your plan is for PPE, social distancing, requiring masks. I put together a whole bunch of ideas and submitted it in my public response. So I thank you and really hope that you think about maybe having an FAQ section on your website about the disease and a hotline that can be answered by staff.
Thank you very much. Next is Megan Ratliff and then Heather Dugdale.
Ms. Hergesheimer,
Yes?
Ms. Ratcliffe did not check in.
All right. Is Ms. Dugdale available, who will be followed by Seema Burke?
Can you hear me?
Go ahead, please, Ms. Dugdale.
While I support the staff recommendation for a distance learning model, I'm troubled at the deadline of the first quarter. While I appreciate that we want to be ready to open when allowed, there is nothing in the current state of affairs in San Diego nor in science that indicates that we'll be in a better situation at the end of October. Actually, it's quite the opposite. And one thing we learned in spring 2020 is that our school district is not nimble enough to easily pivot to accommodate all of the specific needs of family and staff and ensure that our kids receive a world-class education without skipping a beat. Rather than continually piecemealing decisions and, more importantly, communication to families, I ask that our school board modify the staff recommendation and instead follow the lead of CIF and many companies, including Qualcomm, by at a minimum extending the distance learning model certainty until the second semester. As a parent of 2 high school student athletes, there's nothing I nor my children need more than for them to be on their campus, in their classrooms with their teachers and peers. However, I also need the certainty that they won't start school one way and then continually change based on changing circumstances that we cannot control. Waiting until second semester gives teachers the certainty in their learning plans and gives our schools and families the time needed to start a new semester fresh. And I will also echo my extreme disappointment in the lack of parent involvement in designing the distance learning plan. We have robust parent organizations in our district, and to my knowledge, they have not been involved in any way in what that plan should look like. In distance learning, our homes are your classrooms, and without parent cooperation, engagement, and support, any plan will struggle. Now more than ever, we need a robust homeschool partnership that is necessary to help our kids not just survive, but thrive. I'm hopeful that meaningful parent engagement and involvement becomes a greater priority for this school board. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have our last 2 speakers will be Seema Burke and Adam Fisher.
Ms. Hergesheimer,
Yes?
Ms. Burke is not checked in.
All right. If Mr. Fisher is available, would you please bring him online?
Yes, hi, can you hear me?
Yes, sir. Go ahead, please.
Excellent. Hi, I'm a parent, and the current state of the pandemic has made it very unsafe to hold in-person school. And even when San Diego is off the watch list and in-person school is allowed, it doesn't mean it's safe. For recent studies, such as a 65,000 person study in South Korea reported on by the New York Times, have shown especially kids ages 10 and up are at least as likely as adults to catch and transmit the virus. Plus, prior to vaccine, even if and when in-person school resumes initially, it may need to shut back down again. Given that, it is critical to focus on providing as robust a distance learning experience as possible. Key points include 1, keep students at the same school together in online classes. 2, social aspects are critical, especially peer-to-peer interactions and opportunities to facilitate student interactions in pairs or small groups without teachers are vital. 3, parents should be provided more info on what both distant and in-person school will look like. In-person days and distancing, and the online schedule and hours per week of different types of instruction. There should also be an additional survey as the situation has changed dramatically. Other polls, for instance, by the LA Times, indicate 40 to 85% of families are not comfortable with in-person learning. 4, for online classes, students should be offered the opportunity to meet one-on-one or in groups face-to-face with their teachers in a safe outdoor environment. 5, the district should ensure there's proper accountability from students, for instance, for one-on-one feedback. 6, teachers should respond promptly to questions from students online and should be available for live questions. 7, more parent input should be gathered on both in-person and distance learning. 8, elective classes should be preserved to the extent possible, even via distance learning. 9, opportunities should be provided for students to switch between distance learning and in-person school they're in the school situation allows. And finally, 2 key questions. Will families need to select upfront which mode they're doing? And will they be able to keep the same teachers when some go back in person? Thank you.
All right, thank you to all of our speakers for taking the time to address this.
Ms. Hergesheimer?
Yes, Ms. Schultz.
Ms. Burke checked in if you'd like to call her.
Yes, let's go ahead and do that, please. Thank you. Okay, Ms. Burke, if you're there, whenever you're ready.
Ms. Burke?
Odd, it looks like she tried to raise her hand. I wonder if she's struggling with technology.
Is there something we can do?
Her microphone is on, however, and we can hear feedback.
Right.
What does Joel say? Is he looking at this?
Yeah, he's on top of it, and the microphone.
How about I go ahead and read through some of this, and if we can bring her back on before we start our presentation, we will, but I will get us prepped a little bit. So Dr. Haley and staff are going to be making a presentation, and during the presentation to my fellow board members, if you have a question during it, let's go ahead and raise your hand. We'll try and address some of them as we go so we don't get lost in the motion forward in the presentation. And then we'll take further discussion before we take any action. I'm going to go ahead and ask for a motion to operate the distance learning model for the entirety of the first quarter of the 2020-21 academic year, and consistent with the California Department of Public Health mandate guidelines and the San Diego County Public Health Order when the district is allowed to bring students on campus, although remaining in the distance learning model by prioritizing special education students, English language learners, high-risk students, students with inadequate learning environments, and then all other students. Can I get a motion for this, please?
So moved, Mayor.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
Second, Gibson.
Thank you. Ms. Schultz, do we have our other speaker yet?
We will try one more time.
Thank you.
Can you hear me?
Yes, please go ahead. There's a little feedback, and maybe I'll make sure all my board members have their computers muted, and we'll let you go ahead and start, please.
Okay, and many apologies for my technical difficulties. I'm just going to shut off my feedback too. 1 second.
Well, go ahead, please.
Okay. Good evening, board trustees and Superintendent Haley. Thank you for your time. After review of the fall learning plans posted on the website, I would ask that you please consider the following suggestions, if not already reviewed. With respect to whole campus virtual learning, consider having teachers teach from school. This could help ensure a robust virtual learning program with teachers on campus and available for students during standard school hours, just like in a classic learning model. Of course, safety is critical. To keep teachers safe, teachers that are currently sharing classrooms must be given alternative space where only a single teacher teaches in each space. Given the generally cooperative Southern California weather, some teachers may be able to use outside space. In addition, if gymnasiums are not being used, that could be a space for teachers. Number 2, given our district's low COVID-19 rates, consider asking for a waiver for all special education students and any other students uniquely needing to be on campus to have the choice to be on campus at least part of the day during whole campus virtual learning periods. While the district materials reference prioritizing certain students, including special education students, they did not discuss on-campus options. For many of these students, they need multiple teachers, and the experience can be difficult to replicate in a virtual learning setting, no matter how robust, and difficult for parents to monitor and assist with learning. If we start fall with whole campus virtual learning, these students can be well spaced in many classrooms to learn safely and still protect teachers. And 3, please have a well-advertised virtual town hall meeting as soon as possible to discuss the fall learning program in detail. There should be no time limit, and every person that wishes to speak should be allowed to speak, and questions can be answered. We appreciate all the hard work that the administration and the board have been putting into the virtual learning plan and the classic learning model for fall learning. However, as one other speaker noted, we really need to understand now where the district is headed and what we have in plan for us this fall. Thank you for your time.
All right, thank you. I'm glad we were able to get you on line for your comment. And I am going to turn now to Dr. Haley. And I believe as we go through some of this presentation, we will hear how our staff has been considering a lot of the points that people have been bringing forward to us. So please, Dr. Haley.
Okay, thank you. We'll get the presentation pulled up here shortly. Want to thank the board for this opportunity. We have a variety of staff members that will be contributing to this presentation. And just as a reminder, as Board President Hergesheimer, you said, as we go through it, trustees, if you have a question, because of the length of the presentation and the variety of topics, it's probably best just as you can raise your hand and please ask the questions. Just be sensitive to not be speaking on top of each other. And we want to make sure that we give you a thorough presentation and answer every question that you might have, and hear any comments, questions, and concerns. So with that, we will get started. I'm looking at here we go. So this is an update really on presentations that we have been doing on a regular basis for the board using the same framework. If we could move forward. So I wanted to remind all of us, our decision-making will be guided by considering, by considering the health and safety needs of our students, families, staff, and community as our highest priority. And we've shared that before. And health and safety include many factors beyond COVID-19. And then this is an addition, and balancing the health and safety of all of the school community is complex. And that relates to many discussions and meetings that I've been in and others looking at, we've heard talk about teenagers and younger kids and elementary schools and our staff and our parents and our grandparents, all of these, that comprises all of our school community. And so we have to take all of that into account. And I think you'll see as we move through tonight that we have. So I wanted to share some source documents with the board because a lot changed in the month of July. When the state budget was passed in June, and we last met in June in public session, the state mandate at that time was to reopen schools as practical as possible with 5 days a week of instruction. But on July 17th, that changed significantly. Governor Newsom held a press conference, and then later that day followed it up with some new mandates coming from the California Department of Public Health. And so the first document that I'd like to share with the board is called a framework. That's not the PDF framework. So this is what operationalized what the governor said in his press conference. And if we scroll down a little bit, you'll see the key operative language: in-person reopening criteria in bold. Schools and school districts may reopen for in-person instruction at any time if they are located in a local health jurisdiction. For our purposes, San Diego County comprises a local health jurisdiction that has not been on the county monitoring list within the prior 14 days. So San Diego County is on that list. So therefore we would have to be off that list for 14 days before any consideration of reopening. We've heard some people mention, and the governor did not in his press conference, but this was a bit of a surprise and has sparked some debate around the state regarding whether or not elementary schools can reopen. So the state said there would be a waiver process. As of today, they have not indicated what that waiver process would look like. And that is for elementary schools only. There's no consideration of any waiver for middle school or high school for any students that we might have. And then if we scroll down a little bit more, we start to see they included some more in this framework with regards to reopening for in-person instruction.
Really quick question, sorry. When
Sure,
you
go ahead.
said when you said there's no waiver for any students, that does include special ed students?
Correct.
Thank
Correct.
you.
We're gonna cover that more. But at this point in time, the only waiver in this framework is for elementary age students. And so then so there's some language about testing, and if we keep scrolling down, go to the next page, then it has different criteria what to do when someone's been exposed or a positive test. So in the last community message that was sent out, one of the things that I referenced was other considerations that would make it difficult to have stable and consistent in-person instruction. And these are some of the other considerations that I was referring to. Right now in San Diego County, we don't have the testing capacity ability at the county level that this contemplates. And then dealing with positive test results, we could have a situation where students would be bouncing in and out of school, or staff members. And so that is part of what led to the recommendation for the board to consider tonight. So I just wanted to show you the source document. We have this, we can post it. At this point, it's a little more difficult to find online, so we saved it as a PDF. But again, I want to make sure that we are very transparent on our website about all of the information we have, we share with the board and we share with the community. So we'll close this document. And then I will show you the county monitoring list. So in that framework, this is going to take us to exactly what the state is looking at. So when it talks about the county monitoring list, this is the list. So if we scroll down a little bit, we'll see this is what the state is looking at in terms of the 6 items that might lead a district or a county or a local health jurisdiction to be on the list. So you can see the testing, the case rates, the increases. So if we scroll down to San Diego County, you will see us here. And right now, you can see that we are on the list. We don't meet the criteria across the board. The 158.6 would put us above the threshold. The other categories, you see a lot of NAs. If we go back up to the top, they didn't do a dynamic header. You'll see that has to do with hospitalization and some other things, at which point our county is in good shape. So if we can close that, and again, we can provide that link and anybody can monitor it on a daily basis. And then the next document we're going to click on is our local health jurisdiction. And I will give San Diego County Health and Human Services, I guess, a little shout out to be slightly informal. They have done an incredible job meeting with school districts. We've developed a relationship with them, including the medical board that advises and develops the county's public health orders. And I also will say the website that they have developed is incredibly transparent. And I just want to give anybody the opportunity to look for themselves. We hear a lot of people talk about the data. Oh, I'm sorry. I missed a raised hand. Did you have a question?
I did. So everything is from today, which is current.
Correct. This is
Okay.
as of today.
Okay, thank you.
And I want to say I may need a little help because I'm only seeing like 4 slots at a time. So sometimes I'm not seeing whose hands are up.
Yeah, so Joe will carefully look for hands. All right. And you can unmute. I mean, we just want to make sure we have a good flow. If you just want to unmute and ask a question, I'm fine with that. So the next thing you're looking at, and there's a link for this on our website as well, and it will take you to the coronavirus dashboard for San Diego County. And so there's some information, one second, hold on. Oh, that's all right. we'll go back real quick. So we'll scroll up. Great, thank you, very great job. So this document, shows the number of positive tests, and this is the what they show in terms of the table and updated. They update it every day, generally after 4 o'clock. So anybody can see, how many people have been tested, how many people have tested positive. You can see our age span for our students would be 10 to 19. For the most part, for our staff would mostly in that 20 to 69. And how many have tested positive. Down below, they don't break it out by, in this dashboard, the hospitalizations by age group or intensive care by age group, or deaths, but they do in other tables. And then if we scroll down, now we'll click on the daily status update, which I know a lot of people in our community are looking at. They have it, in my opinion, slightly out of order. So we're going to scroll down slowly. And again, there's a wealth of information here that they update every day. I'm not sure. Let's keep scrolling. So this is where you can see now the total number of cases in San Diego County, 28,668. You can see the trend in terms of, when they say cases, that's a positive test result. So you can see the trend in positive test results and the amount of testing that has been taking place. So if we keep scrolling down, hospital census that they update, and again, there's an even better chart that we do have excess hospital capacity. Yes, again, Mo.
I have a question. Can you please show Del Mar, Encinitas, and Carmel Valley, our specific areas? I know that they break it down into that instead of an overview.
They do, well, they don't provide all of, they do provide some data by zip code, but not all of it. So that's another link. Anybody can click on it, yeah. They do have zip code data, but they don't break down everything by zip code.
Okay.
But we can show that link when we go back into the main website.
I think so. I'm guessing, Ms. Muir, what you're saying is, because our neighborhoods are most of our concern, but I think what Dr. Haley's referring to is, in order for us to return to school, we have to look at the whole county.
Right. It would just be helpful to see our area and
Yeah,
what's
yeah,
happening.
we'll go back there before we'll close this out and we'll go back there. Yeah. So if we keep going down, again, this is updated daily. See the bed census. We'll keep going. Keep scrolling down. ICU capacity again. The San Diego County has been bringing people in from outside the county. You can see the number of positive tests has been in decline now throughout the month of July. And this is what I wanted to get. So this is San Diego County's dashboard. They have 13 criteria as opposed to the state. Again, the state is what is determining whether or not we could even be in line to reopen. But this is the county's own version of their dashboard. And so you can see the 13 areas that they're looking at. And for the most part, we're in the green. The community outbreaks, I've had an explanation of exactly what that means and tracing 7 or more positive tests to one place or one event. The case rate per 100 has been going down. San Diego County would like it less than 100. The state wants it less than 150. And then in the red, you see the case investigation. We heard, interesting, from a contact tracer. That has fluctuated up and down. Right now, contact tracing is in the green, but the ability to investigate is in the red. And so that is really being able to track down where all of the positive cases, others that they may have interacted with. So again, this is updated every day and anyone can take a look at it. So now if we close out of this tab and help me look for
There's my
zip
city of
code, there it is. So
residence.
summary of county San Diego COVID, if you can click on zip code, right there. Up. There we go. You can see here, you know, for instance, I know where I'm at, Carmel Valley is 92130. And this would show, we find 92130. And the headers are not dynamic, but I'm assuming that's 209 positive tests. And the rate-
92024
Yeah.
is Encinitas, a lot of it.
So again, you don't get a lot of data here. All you get is the number of positive tests. You don't know if it was a hospitalization, a death, or anything else, but you can see for your zip code, wherever you're at, how many positive tests have been reported. Any other questions on the county dashboard?
Is there any way you could show, it's just not showing in the window, 92067?
92067.
Top
Should
of the
be-
next column.
There we go. 39 positives.
Thank you.
Okay. All right, so we'll close out of this. And we'll go back to the presentation. Okay, so again, we will make sure these are also displayed prominently on our website so people can look for themselves. I do think it's important for people to look at the data, and whether we like it or not, we are part of the San Diego County local health jurisdiction. It is a large county and there is a wide variety of coronavirus conditions in our county. We understand that, but that's the route the state has gone, and so that's what we are monitoring. So we move forward. So then what also came out on July 17th was an update to the schools and school-based program guidance. And so we did go through this section by section with the board in June. And so I won't go through it all again. I'm only going to go through, and it's posted on our website, what's changed. And so there was a change regarding face coverings. And so in the framework and in the guidelines, it references the CDPH guidelines for face coverings, which you can click there. We're not going to. But then in the context of schools, it provides some clear guidance. So face coverings required for all students third grade through high school unless exempt, and we'll come back to that. A cloth face covering or face shield should be removed for meals, snacks, nap time. We generally don't do nap time to the best of my knowledge, or outdoor recreation, or when it needs to be replaced. When a cloth face covering is temporarily removed, it should be placed in a clean paper bag, marked with the student's name and date until it needs to be put on again. Quite frankly, I haven't seen a lot of people doing that. In order to comply with this guidance, schools must exclude students from campus if they are not exempt from wearing a face covering under CDPH guidelines and refuse to wear one provided by the school. Schools should develop protocols to provide a face covering to students who inadvertently fail to bring a face covering to school to prevent unnecessary exclusions. Schools should offer an alternative educational opportunity for students who are excluded from campus.
So
Okay,
is
I wanted to read the exact words, and then I want to tell you what they mean. And by what they mean from lengthy conversations with the Medical Board of Health and Human Services and the state. The state has made it clear we cannot suspend students for not wearing a mask. Because we are offering distance learning, we can send them home. So if we arrived at the point where we were allowed, which we're not right now, but we'll cover how that might look in the future. A student coming to school, they don't have a mask. We ask them to put a mask on. The student says, I'm not going to wear a mask. I don't want to. We could send that student home. But it's not a suspension. It's just they would go home and do distance learning. The other thing that's a challenge, and no one has an answer for it, is what do we do with the student who is exempt? The state did not provide any criteria to say what would exempt a student from wearing a face covering. And within our local health jurisdiction, that is being addressed. Whether or not we will require a note from a medical professional or doctor, or how that will work, we just don't know at this time what will constitute someone being exempt. At this time, in speaking with a lot of people and corresponding with people, I think given the opportunity as we go through the presentation to have students come back on campus, to have everyone safe and out of just simple respect, I think most people at this point in time would comply, hopefully with the mask and face covering guidance. Any questions on that?
I'm wondering, again, this is maybe a little ahead of the game, but if this is, this language is provided so clearly, do we need additional policies or statements going out, or can we just roll that into our dress code or our behavior code or our?
It's pretty clear. The issue is going to be the underlined word exempt. And the legal guidance that we've had pretty consistently since June is a local school board can't impose a higher restriction than a county public health order or a state public health order. So we'll just have to see how this plays out, and how our county and or the state is going to operationalize what does the word exempt mean. And then if a student is exempt and we offer distance learning, can we tell them that their opportunity to continue their education then would be through distance learning? And so that is also why I made the recommendation that I did, because I believe then we can say you don't need to be on campus because we have a full program of distance learning for you.
And again, this kind of jumping ahead to when we can bring
Yes,
students back.
at this time, right. It's in yeah, we'll get there. And part of what I realized in this presentation is it's not linear. These things are all interconnected and interrelated. And yet when we kind of go through a presentation, we tend to be linear. Maybe this is for those who remember Prezi, maybe this was one of the opportunities for that.
But just briefly, it talks about if the students don't have one, we will have a supply that we can offer.
We'll cover that.
And okay.
All right, so moving forward, so that's students. And then keep going. Then there was also new language regarding staff. And again, a reference to the CDPH guidelines. And another consideration, which is Cal OSHA. You know, so for our employees, we have Cal OSHA regulations, and our business and operations department and our human resources department is very aware of those regulations as well. And so it's spelled out again, the expectation is that face coverings will be in place for all staff. And then you can see the limited situations where we might need to do something differently. A lot of people, and you've seen people in the community with the shields, and the shields do allow for facial expressions and when instruction needs that. But to really be compliant with what our county is asking, that it has to have what they call a drape. That in and of itself, the shield isn't good enough. It needs to have that drape at the bottom. And then you can see, I don't know why the random number 8 is there, but that's what happens when you have cutting and pasting. We're not expecting people to wear on campus a face mask for 8 hours when there is outside space, when there's social, physical distancing. We're going to expect that people will be able to remove their mask. And then you can see some additional language regarding serving of food, which our nutrition services department was great in the spring and have a good plan in place, contemplating if we do get to return students to campus. So moving down. This was an entire new section that did not appear in the June 5th guidance. So it was slightly renumbered, ensuring teacher and staff safety, which is now its own section. So you can see ensuring staff maintain physical distancing is critical. We already have had staff on our campuses we've had staff on our campuses providing essential services since last March. We've had more staff on campuses since July. We have posted at all of our work locations, just as all businesses are, to, how we are implementing these guidelines, including what you see here. So one of the interesting bullets down there, there's still an expectation that regardless of if we have people on campus, and kind of consistent with this board meeting itself, that we can, to the maximum extent possible, maintain distancing and conduct staff meetings, professional development, and other things with physical distancing or virtually. And then you can see, just a reference to minimizing congregation of adults in staff rooms, break rooms. And this is a big one that we'll come back to, and for both staff and students, implement procedures for daily symptom monitoring for staff. And so we have ways to address that. So as staff come on campus and contemplating the future with students, how are we going to do symptom monitoring? So moving forward. So then in terms of the distancing, that did not change. It is still the same language from June 5th, but they added in some confusing language. Activities where there's an increased likelihood of transmission from contaminated exhaled droplets, such as band and choir practice and performances, are not permitted. And then right below it, they add activities that involve singing must only take place outdoors. Well, I think choir and singing are fairly interchangeable. So we're trying to get clarity on that. And when I say we, again, back to I meet personally once a week with Health and Human Services, and we've met additionally, had a private meeting with them on the day that July 17th guidance came out. They're very responsive and lobbying on our behalf to get clarity from the state of California Department of Public Health when there is not clear direction. And so we'll touch on that more. But they obviously can see that there's a contradiction between no choir, but you can sing outdoors. And then implement screening and other procedures for all staffs and students entering, conduct visual wellness check. These are different. This is contemplating a more passive approach rather than that active approach. But they're telling us they think there's still going to be some additional guidance on exactly what this will look like. But we are not now, as you see the underline, required to check temperature. And that's a big time saver. Even with the no touch thermometers, there's still a time lag. So anyway, that's a change. I just put it there, and we'll keep moving forward.
Quick question.
Yes.
I heard about a monitoring system that is actually an app where parents check in every day and just kind of affirm that their student does not have a temperature and is well enough to go to school. Is it something that would be useful to us? Have you been able to look into it at all?
Yes, and I've heard different opinions from Health and Human Services as to whether or not that would meet the requirements. And I think it'll be considered later on in the presentation, but if not, we can circle back to it. I personally believe that there needs to be procedures for parents to take responsibility for that symptom checking and staff to take responsibility for themselves. So, and if an app would document it, we need to be able to document that we're doing it. So anything that will meet the guidelines and streamline the process, yes, I agree. So then this one kind of hits on, why under the current situation that we find ourselves in, it's difficult to consider a full reopening and then a closure and then another reopening. And I heard that in one of the comments. So anyway, I don't think we need to go through this because I think opening and closing, although I would love students to be on campus, wouldn't be a stable learning environment and wouldn't necessarily make sense for staff either. So if there aren't any questions on that, we'll just move forward. There's just more information about the difficulty with the framework of what it would look like to reopen. And this will be posted for everybody to see.
I have a question, Rob, about that.
Mhm.
Okay, so you're saying at this time, but shouldn't we be ready for that in case the district does, the county does open? I mean, you're ready to open if the whole county does open?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Because I want to make sure we're poised to do that if
Yes, and that's why we constructed the recommendation the way we did. And making sure that the model that we implement for instruction has the most flexibility in it to provide a robust, rigorous distance learning. And at the same time, if we are able to bring students onto campus, that we can do so, yes.
let's
And-
say, how long would you need then to implement, if, let's say the county did open up, how long would you need to go back into the classroom? Could you do it immediately, or would there be, how long would that take?
I think we could view it differently than that. I don't expect that that is going to take place. And I've met most recently with Health and Human Services on Tuesday. So today is Thursday. And even if we reopen, if we go off that monitoring list, we have to be off 14 days. And then one of the questions is, if a week later you go back on that list and you've gone through bringing a lot of students on campus, and now you got to send them back off campus. So we want a model that will be stable for an entire marking period, that even if a student's on campus, the instructional model would still be distance learning. And as we go through the rest of the presentation, you'll see what circumstances that might be. So yes, we needed something that would give our teachers the opportunity to plan a quarter of instruction, pace it out. And at the same time, I agree 100%, if we have the ability to bring students on campus, that we will do so.
Okay.
But the stability of that learning model, I think, gives our students and our staff that assurance for at least the first quarter of how they will be taught and how they will be graded.
But I mean, we would have the opportunity to, if we were to go back into the classroom, we could do it easily.
Yes, and well, I wouldn't say easily, but yes, if we are able to bring students back on campus, we would be able to do so in this instructional model. Yes.
Just so I'm so sorry to ask. I know I ask a lot of questions, but I just want to make sure.
Okay, we want you to.
Okay, so let's say tonight we vote to go distance learning for the first quarter, but in 3 weeks we qualify to go back. Would we do that?
I think
with the expectation that it could reverse itself, or possibly make it optional.
I think it would be best to hold that till later, because I think there's a lot of considerations to go through. But yes, we have that in our planning.
Thank you.
Yeah. Moving forward, and I do have fellow presenters, and we're going to get to them here in a moment, and they can unmute and help me out at any time they want. So this is the current San Diego County Public Health Order, only the section pertaining to schools, not all of it. There's many multiple sections. So all public, charter, and private schools shall not hold classes on the school campus and shall conduct distance learning only as required by COVID-19. And I didn't fix the typo. So I do know the person who types these out at the county. I keep saying I need to let them know that there's a couple typos. Reopening in-person learning framework for K-12 schools in California, 2020-21. School year issued by the California Department of Health Services on July 17, 2020, available here. And again, anybody can go look at it. One of the things I will also point out, and I've seen some news stories, this applies to all schools, private, charter, public, all. I know that there are some private schools that want to press for being able to reopen because they believe they have different circumstances. I saw one in Orange County, but this applies to all schools. So now we'll keep going. All right, at this point in time, we're gonna go through our 5 focus areas that we have been presenting to the board. And the first one that we're going to go through is health and safety, followed by operations, and social and emotional support systems, family and community engagement, and then finish with learning and instruction, because that ties back into what the model of distance learning will be and how it's flexible and can pivot back and forth. So with that, I'll turn it over to our health and safety focus area.
Good evening. So this is Tina Douglas. Ms. Frazee and I are the two that are facilitating these 2 focus areas, health and safety and operations. There's a lot of overlap between the 2 areas, and we've identified certain sections that health and safety should focus on, and then certain sections that operations would focus on. But there really is kind of a group effort, which is why the 2 of us are doing both of them together. And so we've held our first session with the focus groups. And what we really did was kind of review what we've already done. And we did start really preparing as soon as we were shut down in March. There were things that we started ordering right away. In anticipation, we have heard through several, venues and other school districts as they were starting to order a bunch of personal protective equipment, that a lot of things were getting harder and harder to come by. And then we were worried that a lot of the items would increase in price, which they have over time. So we were very fortunate to obtain a lot of stuff in anticipation of that. And so our first session really with the health and safety group, and there are various people, everybody that wanted to participate, we allowed to participate. And so we did not turn anybody away in terms of size. We knew that sometimes that could get a little unwieldy at times, but it was important for us because this is such a big, important area to get as much feedback as possible. And so on our health and safety groups, we did have principals that were both represented from middle and high school. We had classified staff. We had our district nurses that were part of the conversation, teachers, so a wide group of people that helped us with this. And we talked about everything that we had put into place, and we basically went through all of the areas that are going to be required in our K-12 safe reopening plan, and talked about what some of the challenges are, and really tried to come up with some solutions on how to address some of those. And so the health and safety groups focus really on these 5 bullet points here, promoting healthy hygiene practices, and how do we go about teaching and reinforcing just some of the basics, making sure that we're washing our hands on a regular basis, and how do we incorporate that into our day-to-day world if we were physically coming back onto a campus. Training all staff and educating families. So not only do we have staff that we are concerned about, and obviously students, but the importance of making sure that our families understand what it is that we're doing on the campus. They trust us with their students, so we need to make sure that they know what's happening as well. And so we addressed what that looks like in terms of how do we communicate out to families. We have HR who has pushed out some of our required trainings. New this year is cleaning and disinfecting for the coronavirus. That is something that has not been done in the past. So that is one that's already been pushed out for staff to that are required to take. And a lot of that really stems around the fact that we know that there are going to be teachers that are going to want to use some disinfecting wipes and things of that nature in the classroom, and making sure that they understand the proper uses of those. Yes, Ms. Gibson, I see your hand up.
I think you actually sort of implicitly answered my question, but that training, the cleaning and disinfecting, that will be for all staff members eventually?
Correct. Yep.
Thank you.
I have
And
a question.
then-
Tina.
Yes,
Can you
Ms.
tell me what medical staff did you use that was involved with this group?
Our district nurses both participated.
Did we get anyone outside, like from the county or someone else that has expertise in this area?
No, we on these groups, we did not have anybody from the outside.
But yes, so I mean, multiple times, at least once a week, with the medical board from San Diego County Health and Human Services. So I know what their key items are and I pass that along to staff. So the answer to that really is yes. I am meeting directly with the people responsible for the county public health orders.
And then the other thing with.
And I would, and just add one more thing, and Tina, I don't know if you're gonna address it or not, but we worked with Health and Human Services and the county office. So all districts, we have a safe reopening template, because Health and Human Services here in San Diego County has made it very clear. All they want us to do is focus on the California Department of Public Health document. That's it. That's what they want us to focus on, nothing else. And so they originally did the June 5th version for the template. It needs to be updated for the July 17th. Go ahead, Tina. Thank you.
Yes. And so our custodians, it's been about 2 weeks now, over the course of a 2-day period, so that we could maintain social distancing. We had all of our custodians come in, and we had a in-service at the theater, and everyone was seated. Everyone had their mask. They were seated four seats apart, and we purposely spread it out over a 2-day period so that we could maintain that social distancing. And we had someone come in and provide a training to our teams. And not only did they talk about cleaning and disinfecting, especially in the environment that we're in, I think a big part, which was a really good takeaway for our teams and important for them to understand in this environment, that they really do, as custodians, make a difference to the learning environment of our students. They help morale. People, teachers, staff, students all take pride in their environment when it's in a great condition. And so I really do feel like the custodians walked away with a higher sense of pride in the work that they do, and really appreciated the training that we were able to do for them. Another area that we talked about, and Dr. Haley mentioned, was the symptoms check, the signs and symptoms check. And as you know, we have had people that have been working through this environment. Nutrition services is a great example, facilities, our maintenance and operations, et cetera, finance. We've had a lot of people in operations that have physically still been coming into work. Nutrition services, great example. We have been doing symptoms checks and actually temperature checks as an additional precaution. And really they're required, because they are governed by the health department and they are serving students meals. And so we already have processes in place for those employees that were coming to work when we were serving students. And we've implemented the symptoms check with our maintenance department as well when they started to come back on a more regular basis. Ms. Mossy, we have looked at some of the apps that are out there for symptoms check. They are quite pricey. And so what we are doing is Joel is trying to develop a document that could be used internally in whether it's Google Doc or in some other form that obviously wouldn't cost us money. And so he's working on a mechanism for us to be able to do that for our families. And so we'll see when we get to that point what we might be able to come up with. And then if we can't get there, then we may be looking at some other options.
And Tina, I might add,
yes,
he's currently in the process of developing it for staff. So we'll start with our staff and we'll move on to our students, but we will be implementing it for staff probably within the next couple of weeks to them to be able to sign in and do it in a Google form.
Thank you so much.
And then we're planning for when a staff member or child or even visitor becomes sick. And as we come back to and when we do, at some point we all will, a lot of the conversations have been around what happens. There are some very specific guidelines on what is supposed to take place if somebody becomes ill. And if somebody becomes ill and it's just a normal sickness, that's one thing. But when we start to get into an environment of if somebody actually does become positive for COVID, there are very strict rules around what it is that we should and shouldn't be doing. And one of the things that we have to identify in our safe reopening plan is a district liaison to handle all of that. And so we actually have designated by default, I think, Tina Peterson has been the one who has been handling that for us during the closure. She will be working closely with the district nurses as well on what that, on how that plan is going forward. But in essence, it's Tina who's going to be that designated liaison, and that's a requirement of the Safe Reopening Plan, is we have to identify somebody to be that person for us. And then in terms of maintaining healthy operations, like I said, there's a lot of overlap between health and safety and operations, but this is really around making sure that all of our kids and all of our students and all of our staff are feeling comfortable and know and are aware that if they are sick, then it's okay for them to stay home. We don't want people to be in an environment where if they are having any symptoms, they're worried about letting us know that they have symptoms. We're trying to make sure that we are protecting the safety of our students and our staff. And I see Ms. Frazee unmuted.
So I was just going to add to that. I think we've told you this before, but kind of this information, it's always good to hear more than once, that we do have, when our staff members, if they were to become sick, if they were told to quarantine, they do have the additional Family First Coronavirus Act leaves available to them that we, through HR, will work with them and provide those.
So I have a question about the mask, Tina. Are we giving out a universal mask? Because, you know, when I'm out, I see a lot of people will pull their mask down because they can't breathe. Is that, hopefully we have something that staff feels is comfortable. Have we looked into something that, because I want to make sure everyone is protected, but yet it is hard sometimes to breathe with a mask on. So what have you been doing about that?
Absolutely is. And if we don't mind going to the next slide, we'll talk a little bit about the PPE. And so one of the things that we've done, and actually some of what the state has also done, knowing that it's been very difficult for school districts to obtain personal protective equipment, especially in this environment. And then we noticed there was a spike in cost. They stepped in and helped school districts throughout the state in obtaining personal protective gear. And so ultimately we have masks, and we have face masks, we have shields, face shields that Dr. Haley was referring to. And we have disposable masks, and we also have disposable masks for students as well, in the event that students come to school when we get to that point without one. We also have cloth masks that we have ordered for all of our staff district-wide. And so the disposable masks are just that, disposable. There isn't a requirement per se on what each person can wear or should wear. Some people may feel more comfortable in what they already have. The only requirement really would be depending on the function of their responsibility. So in some cases, you may have heard about the mask that's a N95 mask. In that case, those masks really should be saved for people who perform a function that needs that. So in essence, custodians that may deal with a certain chemical, or our district nurses because they may be coming in contact with someone who has symptoms. We would be saving those pieces of equipment for that specific purpose. And so we've looked at a ton of various samples in terms of masks, and finally found one that we felt was very breathable for people. We actually allowed somebody in the office who has problems with asthma to test it out and see kind of how they feel about being in the mask for a period of time. And so we landed on one that we think will be helpful, but at the same token, there isn't a requirement. So if people feel comfortable in something that they already have, we're okay with that as well.
Do we have enough to last for the entire school year if unfortunately we need them for that duration?
Yeah, ultimately what we've ordered, so what the state provided us in essence was enough equipment, or so they say. We won't know till we get there. We do have most of it. I think the only thing we're waiting on from them now is some hand sanitizer, and really it's supplementing what we've already purchased. But ultimately their goal was to be able to provide enough equipment for us to get us through a 90-day period. And then and we already had some as well. So we should be pretty good for about 6 months. And at that point, we're hoping that the supply would become, better so that we can continue to purchase on a regular basis. At this point, we really haven't had any issues because we already had a stock on hand, but they've also provided a venue for school districts to be able to order where the state orders and have us on a higher priority than just going out and purchasing through vendors. And it's also helping with the cost because, like I said, the costs have gotten pretty high on some of those items. And now with what they've been able to provide us for being able to purchase that directly through the state, that the prices for those items are coming down as well. So we feel like we're in a really good spot. The only thing, and as Dr. Haley had mentioned, with some of the new guidance, they talk about this drape that has to cover the mask. Everybody is scrambling for drapes right now. And so that right now is a bit difficult for us to get our hands on. But we're hoping that the county office will be able to help us with the state and leverage some of that. And again, we would have to try and make sure that we're saving those items for those staff members that really require the use of that, and save that and make that as a priority for those positions. So we've, like I said, we've gotten hand sanitizer. We've actually added additional washing stations across the campus in anticipation of more staff. And, you know, at this point, maybe students at some point, but just in anticipation of more staff coming on to the campuses, we did deploy additional washing stations across campuses. We've installed sneeze guards in our high traffic areas, so that when we do get to that point, even if people are coming in, if anybody has to interact with any public for any reason that may be essential, people feel protected when they have people coming in from the outside. I'm trying to think, there's been so many things that we've been ordering across the board, but I think at this point, in terms of protective gear, I really feel like we're in a good space. We have plenty of touchless thermometers, to go around. So I really do feel like we're not in a situation where we're not going to have things ready for staff. We just ordered an additional round of sneeze guards in preparation for staff potentially coming back at some point, and in the event that they want something at their desk, so that we have some available and we don't have to go and order. We already have them that we can just go out there and install. So those are some of the things that we've done. In terms of intensifying cleaning and disinfecting, all of the custodial staff, maintenance, they've all been out at all of the school sites. They've really have come a long way in getting everything prepared for school, whatever that might be. We've also gone through and have changed out all of the air filters district-wide, and they know that is of utmost priority. That was one of the things that came up a lot during some of our focus area conversations, was ventilation. And so making people understand and know that is a priority for us, and we are making sure that we're doing that on a regular basis. We also started in preparation of what school may look like in opening. We also started turning all the student desks facing forward, ensuring all the staff desks were 6 feet away from the student desk. So that was already taking place across the campuses in preparation. One of the things that came up during our conversations was struggling with how do we limit sharing in this environment. And Dr. Haley, are you trying to say something? Yes.
Yeah, question. Can you describe the machines that we've purchased?
Oh, the disinfecting machines?
Yes.
Yes, sorry.
Just for the board to know.
Yes, so we already had 2 of them before this pandemic. And then after the pandemic came about, we purchased additional disinfecting machines. And in essence, they're exactly that. They almost look like a vacuum cleaner, but they go in and they spray the disinfectant. And then, within you let it dry for a 15-minute period of time. And then the custodian will come around and dry it after that. But those are the devices that we're now using to disinfect across our campuses. So that's another thing that we purchased more of. We already had some in the district, but definitely not enough to make sure that we're keeping things at a level that we need to at this point in time.
So Tina, I have a question about ventilation. Is that a lot of the private schools have looked into having the kids on the fields with the tents from maybe football. Have we looked into outside teaching?
Yes, we ultimately, there have been many conversations around using all available spaces, whether inside or outside, to conduct learning. And so even if we were in a school environment and there was a teacher that was in a classroom, even if they wanted to break out students into separate groups and go outside, we've made that very clear that it is okay for people to use outside spaces whenever they deem that they want to or feel necessary.
But trying to do something like complete classroom instruction under canopies is not something that we work.
Have we looked into that?
Well, for a long-term solution, there are some DSA requirements that we would have to go through. And so we haven't talked about that for a long-term solution because there are some things that would require us. And so we're approaching at it from a shorter standpoint, so that DSA doesn't have to, we don't have to go through a DSA approval process. So the other thing, like I said, one of the things that we have to incorporate into our plan is the limit of sharing in terms of devices and anything that students may come into contact with, science equipment, et cetera. And so we have received, and that's been very difficult for us to try and come up with a solution. As you guys may be aware and probably are aware, the state and federal governments have provided us with some learning loss mitigation funds. And ultimately for our district, it equates to about $5.5 million. And Julie Goldberg, Brian, Marcus and I, Mark Miller, Laura Strachan, all were in a room, basically, virtually, of course, working through what types of things do we need for our district in order to make sure that our students are getting what they need in this environment. And a lot of what came out of that was some professional development. Obviously, as teachers have had to change their whole, mind frame, if you will, in terms of in-person to virtual, and providing them with the professional development needed in order to make sure that they're most effective in a classroom with this new world that we're living in. Additional supports for social emotional aspects, and there are some things that Mark recommended that we purchase to help us with that. And one of the other things we talked about was going into a one-to-one device initiative. We are almost there. And whether or not that is the best use of some of these dollars, and they can be used for that. And so what we all decided was this probably was the best time to bite the bullet and make the use of those one-time dollars. And so we are looking at purchasing Chromebooks, touchscreen Chromebooks for all of our students across the district. And then we don't have to worry about shared devices anymore. The problem is, of course, that the supply is hard to get right now. And so even though we're going down this path, we probably will not be receiving Chromebooks until October or November. And so it may, hopefully, if things align and we do decide that we're not opening until the end of, or until second quarter, we may have them at that time. But so that's another thing that we're doing, and we all feel like that's the best use of those dollars right now. And that will save a lot of heartache in trying to figure out how do we minimize those touch points for our students, and will provide devices for students who don't have them currently now because they're in a different situation than others. So we feel like that's going to be a good thing for us moving forward. And then in addition to that, and Dr. Haley touched upon this, just considerations for partial or total closures. What does that look like? What does that mean? Are we bringing in our students with the highest needs in small groups? And when we close, are we closing and leaving those on campus, or are they total closures? Are we closing an entire school? And there are now some guidelines around that, as Dr. Haley shared, of even what that looks like. And so we really are governed by that, but making sure that we have plans for what that looks like. So what we do with all of that information, as Dr. Haley mentioned, we do have a safe reopening plan for K-12 schools that will be required for us in order for us to open. And we're drafting that plan right now based on our conversations in those focus areas, based on the feedback that we got from those, based on the guidelines that we got, and all the information that Dr. Haley shared with you. And then we'll be looking at bringing that draft back to those focus areas when we have our meeting next week. And then having that all in a draft document will allow us to have some focus on our conversations. So in a nutshell, that's pretty much what we've been working on for the last 2 months.
So just
Ms. Frazee, oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say briefly, though, can we still have the devices that we were checking out in spring so that
Oh,
no
yes.
student would be without a device? This is just whether we can have one-to-one. Got it. Thank you.
Absolutely, yes. And we are working on a plan for what that checkout would look like. We do still have students that have devices that kept them through the summer because we knew that they needed them. And so we do have students that still have Chromebooks checked out. But yes, we still have obviously enough that we can deploy out to those that need them. And then when we have all of them in, develop a plan for what that looks like so we can get all the devices in the hands of all of the kids.
Thank you.
Ms. Frazee, do you have anything that you want to add before they move on to the next focus area?
No, I think you covered it all just beautifully.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
All right. Good evening, Board President Hergesheimer and trustees. So as we all know, this pandemic has left us with a lot of uncertainty and with a community of learners who are quite honestly suffering socially and emotionally. We have done tremendous work in the last 3 years in this area around social emotional supports for our students within the district. And with this new pandemic, we're going to continue to evolve our work with these new challenges. Even though our campuses have been physically closed, our team has continued to provide care and adjust supports for our students as needed. We have emphasized the importance of demonstrating empathy and compassion for our entire San Dieguito community of students, parents, teachers, administrators, and support staff, as quite honestly, each of us has been affected differently by this pandemic. So since school closure, the administrative services team, which has been led by Tiffany Hazelwood, Laura Strachan, Melissa Sage, and myself, we have been collaborating with a talented group of pupil personnel services staff composed of counselors, student support specialists, school psychologists, as well as school administrators and teacher representatives. With the focus of really evolving our social emotional support needs for students, we have been evaluating our current multi-tier systems of support, and we have been developing resources so that we can safely re-engage our students when they return in August. I have provided a number of links which outlines our work, and please note these are in draft form, and we will be continuing to make adjustments as needed. And as you look at these links, we need to keep in mind that when we closed school in spring, we had students going into a distance learning model where they knew their teacher and where their teacher knew their students. When we begin school in August, we're going to have teachers who are going to have a whole new subset of students. And so the importance of building relationships and building rapport with the students is going to be of the utmost importance, but it's also going to be much different. It's going to be much different because they're going to try to do this virtually, and we're going to talk a little bit about that here in a second. So what we've tried to do with this group is that we've tried to build a bank of resources to promote a safe and welcoming and supportive virtual learning environment with an emphasis on really building those resilient strategies and those healthy coping strategies for our students. With students having been out of school since March, another charge was in providing resources to mindfully help our students get back to the regular routines. And with this, we're going to need help from our parent community. And as such, our team is also building a bank of family resources as well. And we look to further this in August. It's our hope to build out modules for our parents so that they can, attend some sessions on social emotional learning and finding ways that they can help their students navigate back into school. Being a parent myself of a rising senior, sophomore, and a sixth grader who start school in a couple of weeks, I know as a parent, I can empathize and I can really walk in their shoes as needing some resources to help support their student learners as we transition back into school. As you'll see with the second link, our team has evaluated our current multi-tiered system of support to ensure that our San Diego community, yep, go ahead, Rob.
You want us to click on that first link for you?
Yeah, if you can, I can't do it.
Okay.
Yeah.
No, down, that one right there. No, up.
You can go up, yep. Yeah, so as you can see there, you know, our focus has been on the readiness to learn, the re-engagement and the connection, really looking at our multi-tier system of supports. And then to the left, you have the parent resources, and to the right, you have student resources. Again, draft form, not quite finished yet. But if you look in the Venn diagram, you know, really looking at that whole child, focusing on social emotional. Glad my dog's not here. He'd probably be jumping on me. So if you see a dog run and jump on me, he just heard this dog. So I think we should be okay. So we can jump to the new slide. So when you look at the new slide, when you look at the second slide, that's really looking at our, sorry, if you go back to social emotional, good, click there, multi-tiered system of support. So when you look at the second slide, that's really the emphasis on our tiered system of support, and really, you know, making sure that our San Diego community know that we have prevention and intervention efforts. As we identify a student in need, we have a robust system of interventions, and we do have a referral process for those students. And, you know, about 4 years ago, we made a district commitment to Tier 2, which is our student support specialist group, and they've been invaluable in helping that second tier of students really get the support they needed. And then if we jump to Tier 1, which is really all all staff involved, you know, looking at teachers, counselors, administrators, custodians, you name it. Those are the people that are working with students, all of our students, each and every day. And so, you know, our focus is on prevention and how we can support those students. So as you move to the third link, you're going to see key elements in terms of outlining the social emotional support and how we're going to help support teachers foster that, you know, virtual, engaging and welcoming learning environment. Again, rough draft, but you're going to start to see the framework in terms of our focus being on Tier 1 and really pushing that into the classroom. So to support our staff, we've outlined a professional development plan, which is really going to focus on trauma-informed practices, as well as building those engaging virtual learning environments. I know that this is going to be outlined more in detail with the upcoming slides, but that trauma-informed practice is going to be an online module that's going to allow staff to really interact virtually with the module, focusing on those trauma-informed practices. And last but not least, to guide our social emotional efforts and to give us data points moving into the opening of school, we're going to be administering the Co-Vitality Social Emotional Screener to all students in the district the week of August 10th. This is going to allow us to not only identify general themes in terms of what our focus areas should be those first couple of weeks, but it's also going to help us identify students that are going to need those additional support so that we can hit the ground running immediately with our referrals to our Tier 2 or for our Tier 3 interventions, and or make a warm handoff to Care Solis, which you all approved back in April. And I cannot tell you the timing of that was impeccable. Our families continue to use the Care Solis app and continue to reach out and look at different avenues to get mental health services. I want to thank our team for their work in this area, and also want to thank our school board for their support and commitment to social emotional resources. But more importantly, I really want to thank our teachers. They're going to be charged with a very, very tall order, and that is to really get to know their incoming students virtually when school opens. We have an amazing and talented teaching staff, and I know that they're up for the challenge. And I also know that they're going to knock it out of the park, and that they're going to make sure our students are welcomed virtually when we open in August. And with that, that's my slide.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Good evening, board. Thank you for letting me give a chance to speak on the family and community engagement piece for you today. You know, one of the areas that we wanted to really highlight with the family and community engagement was really leading to an improvement upon the communications that we have with our stakeholders, with our community, especially for 2021. And one of the main ways that we wanted to get started with that was the process that we went through with relaunching and redesigning our district website as well as all 10 school websites. Perfect timing for today's meeting, and that our district website and our 5 high school websites actually relaunched their designs today. Our 5 middle school websites will relaunch their designs on Monday. But the reason why we really wanted to focus a little bit on making sure that we were able to go forward with a more user-friendly model for our webpage was that in doing so, we're now able to actually build new pages and supplement the information for our distance learning program that will be more user-friendly. Obviously, I know the next folks here will speak a little bit more about that distance learning program, but being able to have a format that works within a desktop model as well as works even better with mobile models, since we know that a large percentage of our community get most of their information from our district website on their phones or tablets. We feel like this process will help make that a little bit better for everybody, as well as creating streamlined FAQ pages. At current point in time, we definitely receive a lot of questions via email. I receive a lot of questions via phone call and our social media pages, and being able to have a place that can live on our district website that people can find easily to begin getting more answers to these questions that they have will definitely be a step forward in as far as really creating that engagement that our students and families and parents have been looking forward to. Additionally to that, with our new website, in working with Superintendent Haley as well as our principals, we're looking at adding video PSAs at the district and school site level, as well as continuing the Student Summit program as different ways to engage with our community. Additionally, one of the things that we're really auditing looking forward right now is an examination of our social media platforms and looking at best practices to engage within our community. Currently, we are using Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube, but one of the things moving forward that we want to do is really take an audit of how we're using those different platforms and make sure that we're using them to the best of our abilities to really reach out to the community, as well as looking at the potential to use other platforms such as Instagram that can reach an even larger segment of our population that may not be using the other platforms that we're currently focused on. In addition to that, one of the things that we're looking forward to next is really focusing on including more input from our stakeholders during the decision-making processes throughout the district. And and obviously Superintendent Haley can step in as well, but I do just want to make sure that that is more intended as kind of as it reads, to have input during the decision-making process, not necessarily making the decision, not necessarily all of our stakeholders making decisions, but having input within the process so that as we come forward with presentations to the board and come forward with the plans that our instruction and learning group is working on, we kind of have those ideas, whether it's from surveys or thought exchange and summits and other forums, to really make sure that we have the pulse of the community as we're moving forward. As we
that might be a good spot to jump in. We were looking at doing some further surveying in late June. In late June, it's a new month. I just created it. It's June and July together. And then as we were kind of monitoring what was going on at the state level, we had advance knowledge that there would be a new situation probably coming our way on July 17th. So we hit pause. And then at that point, it didn't make sense. And to me, it doesn't make sense now. We had 2 different versions of a pretty robust survey to go out, but surveying people on what we can't do seems a bit disingenuous. When we have more clarity from the state and we need to do another survey, we certainly will. But finding out how many parents want to send their kids to school 5 days a week right now doesn't really make sense, given that we don't have any public health authority to do that. So, and we did have a wealth of knowledge built up from March to June engaging with our community. I can tell you personally, I've processed thousands of emails. I've had probably more than 100 phone call conversations. We've had meetings with students and parents. At some point, our staff needs to be able to process that information and look at how we operationalize it. As we do get into this new 2021 school year, we will engage with our principals, with their school site councils, and at the district level with our parent site rep group again, whether in person or virtually.
I know we're not done with our discussion here yet, but I just want to maybe jump in and say a quick thank you at this point, because I think so many of the questions we've had and the unease that's in our community, that Mr. Miller, Mark Miller and McQuell, with all that you guys are presenting as connection points moving forward, that I think hopefully that will give some sense of connection and guidance and comfort to everyone who has a lot of questions and wants to see what we're doing. So thank you. I'll let you continue, McQuell.
I have a question for McQuell.
Mhm.
Is he still online? Hi.
Yes.
So, we have our board meetings. Is there any way they can access and watch it over the phone? Because most people are on their device. We must have that capability to watch our board meetings.
I think they should be capable of doing that now.
Yes, it should be capable. The meetings, for instance, for today's virtual meeting right now, it's, anybody within the community that wants to watch, it's, it's a YouTube link. So, watching that on your phone, on your tablet, or your desktop.
Well, that's what I mean. Is there any way to just make it easier instead of going on YouTube? I guess that's my question, because let's say we have a forum where we want to hear back from the parents. It'd be nice if they could just go on their phone and see it directly on their phone instead of going to another link. Is there an easier process? I guess that's what I'm asking you.
I think if we did a forum, wouldn't we set it up differently as the meeting?
We have multiple platforms that we can use, but for a meeting like this, the most effective way to make it available for people to watch is via YouTube, and which is compatible with any device that they might have. If we were looking at a smaller group or an interactive meeting where we were going to be taking more comment, we have access to Zoom that we're using here, and we have other platforms as well.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Mossy, did you have a question? Yeah.
Yeah, thank you so much. And I want to reiterate your gratitude for everyone working hard to answer a lot of the questions that we ourselves have, and we've heard from constituents and community members, families. I love what you've outlined, especially because it is a way to move forward with everyone on the same page. But when we talk about video PSAs, I would love to see how often, I think weekly or bi-weekly, we talk about examining the use of social media. I'd like to hear more about, when that will be implemented, how often we'll be posting stuff on different platforms, how often we're going to have our student summit, when it will be, how are we going to gather input. These are all broad ideas, and I guess what I'd like to see is some specifics.
So we are already, as McQuell said, using Facebook significantly. So I'm not sure what data you want to see from that as the owners of that organizational page. We can see how much engagement we have, who's clicking, who's following up, comments and questions. If there's a way to give a report to the board on that, we can certainly work on it.
Well, I think, that's really helpful, but also just, a framework of how often we're going to post an update. So if we get questions, we can say, hey, have you checked the website this week? The fact page is updated every Monday or every Friday, or, have you checked social media, because there's up-to-date information there. I'm not really sure how we're updating or how often we're updating. I think it might be good at this point, just because things are fluctuating so frequently, that we're
updating quite frankly in real time. We don't wait. So I hear what you're saying, and I think maybe when we meet again, we can provide some data on that. But what I've generally found over the course of the last 2 or 3 months, even reporting to the trustees, as soon as I get the data, I share it. For instance, when the state CIF came out with the guidance to compress 3 seasons of sport into 2, we immediately started sharing that with our staff, our community, our coaches. We don't wait. So we can take a look at that and get you some data metrics on that. But in general, we don't wait. As soon as we have a message or an update, it's posted for everybody.
And I think sometimes maybe people don't, they might need the Cliff Notes version or the bold words on the page just to get, their information concise. And I guess I just want to make sure we're communicating in a way where everyone feels like they know exactly what's going on and they know what we know to the best of our ability.
Absolutely.
Right, and kind of speaking what Dr. Haley mentioned as well, we had a previous iteration of the FAQ page on our spring emergency distance learning plan page. And on that page, it was a situation where as soon as we had a question and answer that was available, those were updated as soon as those were coming in. We didn't wait for a specific amount or period of time before we actually updated those pages. We would update those as well. But that said, with the launch of our new websites, we do believe it will be a lot more user friendly and a lot easier for people to find those pages to make the information more accessible.
So I have another question, two questions actually, one for you and one for Dr. Haley. I have a lot of parents emailing me about their concerns about colleges. Is it possible to put I guess it would be in conjunction with our counselors, and maybe Rob can jump in and put the dates, like maybe we could text the kids like, now's the time. A week from now, you're supposed to have your college application in. A week from now, you're supposed to have, sorry about that.
Keep an eye on your dog, Mark.
Is that I know that a lot of these people, of course, are concerned about their kids going to college. And it would be really helpful if we did a timeline and just help them out, texting them or the kids, this is due, just want to let you know. And also a lot of people are texting me about they can't reach their counselor and they're very concerned about their kids getting into college. Can they reach their counselors now? Is that possible? Or when would that date, would they be available?
Let me jump in. Great points. And we've had discussions, that a lot of that falls into, Mark and his team. Our counselors come back next week. I've had conversations with some of those counselors. There's a lot of anxiety. I know a lot of incoming seniors, myself personally, and Mark, you can unmute, in your own household.
Yep, I have a senior.
And they're not sure, colleges, they were juniors when this happened. And now they're facing their senior year and, how is the college admissions process going to work? Because there has been a lot of changes, the UC system moving away from the SAT. So yes, I get there's a tremendous amount of anxiety and we're really going to need our counseling department, to be in an all hands on deck mode,
right?
Starting right away next week. And
there's kids who are still gonna.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, maybe we can look at a special page on our website. I agree.
Right. Well, they're still going to need to fill out applications and essays. And if the counselors could jump in there, I think that alleviate, this has been such an odd time period, but if they would alleviate that, I think that would take away a lot of the angst, not only with the parent, but with the children. And is it possible to send out texts for the students and the parents to say, this is coming up, this is the timeline?
Yeah,
because now they can't go in and see the office. Is that, could we text the kids and the parents and let them know the different timelines?
So our counselors are already working on this. Last spring, when the COVID school closure happened, we quickly jumped into compiling lists of virtual college visits, as we know that the spring is a big time for students to go take visits, and they were unable to. And so each of our high school websites, and I know on our district website, are a list of virtual college visits, which is really that first step as they're going through trying to sort out some of that college search. I know I personally, within my own family, we've utilized the San Diego college website page, as there are a number of links. Our counselors do return next week. College and career readiness is a focus for them. As we get the most up-to-date information, absolutely, we're going to get that out to our families. And if you're able to peruse some of our sites already, they are starting to list some of that information as we get it. I think we also need to understand some of this is unfolding, and some colleges don't know what they're going to do quite yet. But Ms. Muir, I do take your recommendations to heart, and we are working the best we can to make sure that we're getting in touch with our families. Because again, as Dr. Haley says, I have a senior. We don't know what we're going to do quite yet, but we're just, we're kind of sitting tight, waiting for some of these colleges to make some of those decisions. But please know that that's going to be a focus area for us.
Well, I don't think we should wait. We should go forward with the essays and helping with the timelines so that they are poised to go forward and send in their applications I don't want to wait. These parents, I've talked to like probably 5 parents today, very upset about the whole college situation.
Oh, I am too.
And
I'm not saying to wait by any means. I'm not saying we're waiting. I'm just saying we may not have all the information in terms of what's going to be required. Because again,
Right.
We know that we have some families that travel to Arizona or Utah to try to take the ACT, only to find a note on the door saying, sorry, it's closed today. So
right.
Again, I know I'm also in that boat. My daughter's yet to take the SAT or the ACT because she was out last spring. So now we're kind of like, well, what do we do? So we're trying to do the best we can with the information we have, but absolutely we're going to get on this as soon as possible. When our counselors return next week. And I know our staff is talented and they're going to make sure our families have the information they need.
It's a nice segue to the next bullet point and Aries and Parent Square. So your question about texting, Parent Square is going to be a much better, much more user-friendly way to communicate with our parents and our students than what we had before. We actually met with the Parent Square team and looked at investing in it ourselves as a district, but in the period of time we delayed and didn't do that, Aries ended up getting rid of the platform that they had, which was the one we were using, and have partnered with Parent Square. And so, yeah, we can granularly send out texts, emails, do lots of different things with that. Reminders, it's much more user-friendly than Aries communication that we had before.
Have you launched that yet? Have we used it yet or not? Or when are you going to be launching that?
I'll default to McQuell on that one.
Yes, so Parent Square bought out one of our former partner in SignalKit, and a lot of the features and formats that will be there are currently being in use, but one of the things that moving forward that we're going to see with Parent Square is a lot of what Dr. Haley's talked about with the different features. But currently, and this was one of the things that we wanted to add to the bullet point, was that currently there are different ways for our family members, our parents and students to get the communications that we are sending out from the district via their Aries account with Parent Square. But one of the things that we have noticed within the summer, especially with the emails that I've been getting, is that a lot of our parents or students just are not 100% aware of the different formats that they're to get our information. So that's kind of one of the things that we got out of this, is that we want to be a little more proactive in making sure, especially starting with 2021, that our parents and students are aware of the different ways that they can go in, edit their accounts, and get SMS text messages for their updates, get emails, get voice calls, and as well as for the app feed being the 4 most common ways that we're able to use the Parent Square platform. But that's one of the things that we've definitely gained through this process and gained from the messages that we're getting from the community, is that we want to make sure that we're more proactive this year in letting them know of the different ways that they can begin to receive our communications.
So how many people used it before? Excuse me. How many people used it before what you were, the SignalKit? What are we talking? What percentage?
Well, it's the platform that we use to communicate with our entire community, with all of our communications, whether it comes from one of our principals sending something out, or Superintendent Haley sending out one of his communications. It's the same platform that we use to send out all of our district communications.
Okay, thank you.
And I would just like to say that I know you're talking about uncertainty as we're rolling through the summer, but when school starts, we still have some of our like our college apps, seminars, and so forth for seniors that will, I think, also be, it will exist just as it did before, and that those same teachers that have helped the kids will get up to speed and help walk them through it when the school year starts. But I'm not sure now if we need to go back to McQuell, if he's still working through his points here, or where we are on our presentation.
I would like you to address that last point if you could, McQuell.
Yes. Or Dr. Haley, did you want to speak first?
No, I wanted you to. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay.
Last one.
Yes, the last one was slightly built into the previous one, in that we've realized, especially with a lot of the surveys coming back in, we were very happy with the amount of people that responded to the surveys and thought exchanges that we sent out in the spring and earlier in the summer. But we did realize that there were underrepresented communities that did not participate in a lot of the communications that we sent out. We noticed some of it due to language, some of it due to access and other barriers. So as far as access, specifically talking internet access and being able to go in and fill out the surveys, one of the things that we're looking at now is partnering with, and this is where we go in the last point, partnering with Parent Square, is being able to make sure that we're a little more proactive in letting people know that they have different ways to see those communications, to be a part of it, to be able to be a part of the surveys and the thought exchanges that we have. But outside of that, what we really want to do is find new ways to reach the members of our community that may have other barriers. So for me, within the communications department specifically, we're going to be a little more proactive, as we said earlier, in actually looking at different ways that different segments of our community receive information. We're not talking about information specifically for school or from the district, but the way that they're receiving just any kind of information that they get as a family, and possibly trying to find ways that we can work within that, whether it's working within a representative group or really just kind of any avenue that a lot of our families that maybe English is not a first language within the household are getting their information, and finding ways to work with those partners to make sure that we're able to fully communicate with the members of our community, because we want to make sure that everybody is fully represented, and we want to make sure that everybody has a chance to fully understand the different communications that are coming out from the district.
So I have a question. Aries has been down. Why is that? The parents have not been able to access Aries. It's been down for like 3 weeks? Has it been down, or what's going on with that?
Not to my knowledge, it's not down.
Aries is not
Yeah,
down. It was down for a day so that we could transition databases into the 2021 database, which is a standard practice, which we do every school year. So if somebody tried to log on during that time, yes, they may not have been able to.
But it's up now.
Ms. Massey, I know, has a question, and then I think before we head to our next work groups, I'd like to suggest a 5-minute break, but let's start with your question, Ms. Massey.
I'm talking about modes of communication, the good old fashioned telephone. A lot of people are familiar with that, at least my generation. Will our phones be answered by people? I know someone mentioned having a hotline, but I mean, just being able to call your school and have someone answer might be really helpful.
Yes, the phones are answered.
All right, do we have any more with this work group to be shared? I don't want to cut anyone off here. But I think maybe before we start the next work group, it's been over 2 hours, so I'm going to suggest a 5-minute break. If Ms. Schultz could start the clock running, and we will try to all be back in a few. Go ahead.
5 minutes back? 5 or 10?
5 minutes, and maybe mute, turn off your screen for the
How
moment.
about quarter after? Is that okay?
I'm just going to have her start a 5-minute clock because I don't have a clock in front of me to know what I'm
Okay,
saying.
thanks, Beth.
I'm going to go ahead and call us back in and see if we are ready to begin our next working group, if Dr. Haley's here to introduce.
Yes, we are. We are ready, and I will turn it over to our learning and instruction team.
All right, well, hello and good evening. My name is Brianna Weatherford, and I'm the proud principal of Oakcrest Middle School. Go Waves. And first, I'd like to thank the Board of Trustees and Dr. Haley for the opportunity to provide this update this evening on behalf of the Learning and Instruction Focus Area. I'd also like to introduce my colleagues who will be joining me this evening with providing updates. We've got Kara Dolnick from Degano Middle School and Brett Colleen, principal from Canyon Crest Academy. Also, a very special thank you and recognition to Jennifer McLuhan, one of our fabulous instructional specialists, for her support with the creation of this presentation. You'll see some beautiful graphics that she helped design this evening. And to Julie Goldberg, who's our coordinator of accountability and assessment and research, for her incredible expertise and support throughout this entire process. So I'll start with just kind of introducing and thanking our learning and instruction focus area. And we had over 55 members that were a part of this work group, including teachers, counselors, administrators, and that also included representatives from some of our specialized programs, such as special education and programs that support our English language learners. I think it's really important to note that throughout this process, there was continued collaboration with our faculty association, and we had a lot of teachers interested in being a part of this focus area that were not directly involved in the committee work, but they were provided with numerous opportunities for collection of feedback, input, and responses on the work that we were engaged in this summer. If we could progress to the next slide. Thank you. So I wanted to take a moment to just talk about our process with the work that was conducted this summer by this focus area group and the members of this team. So first and foremost, I think it's really important to bring note to that all of the conversations and priorities for the learning models were centered around two really important guiding documents, Senate Bill 98 and our Assembly Bill 77. And in the review or the input of multiple learning models, these documents were kind of our core values as we move forward regarding mandates and things that need to be in place as we talk in just a few moments about the differences between specifically the distance learning model that we experienced in the spring versus what we're gearing up for the fall. Learning models were reviewed and analyzed under the guise of these documents, and there were questions, there was opportunities for input and feedback specifically related to, as I mentioned before, the distance learning model and experiences from the spring of 2020. With the work that we did, there were then specific outputs and products from each of these meetings focused on questions and key priorities for each different learning model, really focused on all possible reopening scenarios. And I think that it might answer some of the questions we heard previously, that the work again that was conducted this summer looked at all possible reopening scenarios. And then last but not least, the work still continues. So we have focus groups that are continuing to work on really specific details of each of those explored learning models, again, utilizing the mandates in the Senate Bill 98 and Assembly Bill 77. And those continued conversations are focused on items such as bell schedule development, student and teacher expectations, grading and assessment, student equity, just to name a few. Again, noting that that work still moves forward and continues in preparation for a really successful start to the school year. We could progress to the next slide. Oh, perfect. All right, so one of the biggest focuses of the work of this group or focus area over the summer was to really clearly define, articulate, and understand how distance learning in the fall of 2020 will be different from the spring. And so if I could ask you to please take a look at this graphic, and I believe this graphic Dr. Haley has shared previously in messaging with our community. It's also been posted on our district Facebook page, but it really targets some key essential things that we can expect that will be different as we move forward. So in the fall of 2020, what can we expect? We can expect quality academic content that is challenging and aligned with grade level standards. This is a new addition, and I'm going to turn it over to Kara in just a moment to talk a little bit more in detail about our second row here, which is the measuring student learning loss. But we can expect a really clearly defined measurement of student learning loss with the support of what we're calling a universal screener. And again, more information and details on what that actually is in just a moment.
I have a question about the attendance. How are you going to do attendance? And what happens if someone doesn't check in?
Dr. Haley, do you want to comment on attendance specifics?
I think that will be covered as we progress through, but that is a state requirement. We will be taking attendance. We'll take attendance in the distance learning world just as we would take attendance in the physical student in a classroom world. We'll be checking students in and out of classes.
What
and
happens if they
keeping track
don't
of-
check in? What are you gonna do
Well,
if they
that-
don't check in?
That it also gets addressed in the state mandate and the learning continuity and assessment plan. We are to keep track, and if students are not logging in, we're to intervene. We're to reach out to that student, that family, and get some understanding of what's going on, if they're needing support, if they don't have, and this again will come up a little bit later in our nonlinear way of moving through, but we know there are students with unsuitable learning environments, students who don't have access to space and necessarily a network that can support full distance learning. So the state is very concerned about that.
So
Yeah,
I
and
know
Dr.
my, so can I finish my thought here?
Yeah.
Is I know when my son was sick from school, I would get a email. Will we be sending it out an email? How will we be able to, because I want to make sure we're on track, we don't lose these kids. So if they
Yeah.
miss a day, are
yeah.
you going to email the parents that day like
So
we used to do?
Yeah, so we are working on those details because again, taking attendance in the virtual world is going to look a little different. So we are working on our system for which to track it and then a mechanism for which to send home. Going back to the social emotional slide and the tiered intervention of supports. So last spring when we had distance learning, we actually set up a referral system. So we had teams at the various schools that would go and try to interact with those students that were not engaging in their learning. And we're going to continue that practice. And we're actually going to be training on that practice of what we learned from last year and how we can improve upon that. Because 100% agreement, we don't want to lose these students. And we're going to try to up our communication when a student is not participating so that we can get on that immediately. That's a,
So
that's a
I'm
great
just, I
question.
just want to be clear. We'll be emailing the parent when they don't check in.
Or it
Well-
could be a phone call or a text.
Correct. And that was
Yeah.
consistent with our practice last year as well.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, jumping back in then, a couple other expectations that's going to differentiate the spring from what we're expecting in the fall. We can expect a combination of daily live instruction, and I know there's a lot of education jargon that gets thrown around, but synchronous instruction. So daily live instruction with a minimum number of instructional minutes every day for students, along with independent student work opportunities, which is known as asynchronistic instruction. And really it should mirror what we see or what takes place in the normal brick and mortar classroom. As you mentioned, we can expect daily attendance and accountability with clear bell schedules, which we'll be showcasing some draft samples in just a few moments. And then last but not least, we can expect letter grades to be earned for students representing quality and mastery of course standards, clear grading policies, and regular reports of academic progress. So
Good,
again,
Okay, go ahead, Bree.
I just wanted to highlight using this graphic, the differences in regards to expectations with the guide of the Senate Bill 98 between the spring of 2020 and what we're preparing for and expecting for the fall. And go ahead,
Okay.
Mr. Yes.
Like I had spoken earlier about the counselors, and I don't see that on here. And if our parents are going to be accessing this, I think that's one thing that they'd like to know is a clear message on our counseling too, that they'll be able to reach their counselor. And is it possible to go through, like, how the parents can be able to access the counselors? I guess would be, if you could have something there for them, that would be perfect. Thank you.
Okay, great suggestion. And just to reiterate, these are just some of the components that were highlighted in the Senate bill. We wanted to present some of the main things we know that might come up as questions this evening, questions that our communities have had, but I appreciate the feedback on the counseling lens as well.
Yes, if you could put out, they said our counselors are going back to school or back to work in a week from now. If our parents knew that, I just want to alleviate that stress about college.
Okay.
And that would be great if they had access. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And what I'm going to do next is I'm going to turn it over to Kara now for some additional details, as I mentioned, regarding that second row there, the measurement of student learning loss, where she's going to give just, again, additional information about what a universal screener is and how that supports student learning. Thank you, Kara.
So if you go to the next slide, you can see obviously with going into the emergency situation we had in the spring, one of the concerns we have is with possible student learning loss, and that's not just a concern for us, that's a concern across the state. So as part of the state mandates, districts will develop a strategic plan for how to identify and address learning loss for all students. San Dieguito's plan involves implementing what's called an academic universal screener. This is a tool that's used to define, mitigate, and measure student learning loss and growth throughout the year. So not just at the beginning of the year, but actually throughout the year. This tool will give us information on each student's progress towards grade level standards. We can use the detailed information that we receive from the reports of this screener to focus on the skills that students are ready to learn, and then provide interventions and supports, which will then help to accelerate learning for all students. And of course, in particular, our most struggling students. You can go to the next slide, please.
I have a question first.
Yeah.
When you're talking about the universal screener, then who is alerted that there's an issue?
So I actually will go through in this slide kind of how we're going to process it and how we're going to use it. So that may answer your question.
Right, because I know we had that on Aries and that the council was able to assess if the grades did go down. Is that similar to this?
This is a little different. So let me kind of explain, and then if this slide doesn't explain it, I can maybe answer your question a little better. So the way that, again, the universal screener works is that we will be given the universal screener in our math and English classes, much like the state testing was. So to start with, our San Dieguito math and English teachers have worked through the summer to research, vet, select an academic universal screener that will be administered in both English language arts and math. And then the way that universal screeners are used is, again, they're given multiple times during the year. So there is baseline data that'll be given at the very beginning of the year, so in September. And then we monitor progress. So in January, we'll give it again to see how they're progressing at that time. And then we look at the end of the year for the growth data. And that end of the year administration is going to help us see overall during the year how the students progressed, but it also helps to determine how our interventions and strategies are working and allows us to adjust them. So the results from each of the administration we'll use to support students in several ways. The early administrations will help to inform course placement. Teachers can use these results to inform classroom instruction and provide targeted skill-based interventions. And then it will also be used as an additional measure for specific intervention programs. It'll help to measure the effectiveness of our mitigating learning loss plan. And it can also be used as a basic skills criteria for reclassification of students who are English learners. So all of these student supports will begin in the fall along with other supports. And then we'll be able to measure the growth of students throughout the year. Did that address your question, Ms. Mary?
Yes and no.
Okay.
Did we just get this universal screener?
So we're in the process of vetting a universal screener now.
And how much is this? Is universal screener? You don't know. Okay.
No, sorry.
So the results going to the parents, because this, what was the test we used to give, come down from the state? It slips my mind right now that everyone
The
took.
CAST,
The
or the
CAST, yeah.
SBAC.
Yeah. And so is this, we've got it 3 times a year, and will the results go to the parents?
You know what, I don't actually know I'm not sure if it goes to the parents or if it is implemented, uploaded in Aries, sorry. It may be that, I'm gonna see if maybe, I don't know.
Because that would be the most important thing if they knew, because we did get the other results to the parents when we took those tests, a standard across the board and see where everyone is at. And what is the level where you think there's going to be intervention?
So let me go back. So they will actually be available in Aries. I phoned a friend. They will be available in Aries for parents to view, just as all the other tests that we had were. So.
And so what is the level of intervention then?
It varies. It's throughout. So as we said, we're doing it in English, math, arts. All of our schools have multiple interventions and strategies. Some are whole classes. So for example, in math, we have whole classes that are essentially intervention programs for our students. In some classes, there's interventions within the class. So as Mark talked about earlier, with a multi-tiered system supports with the social emotional, we also have that for the academic. So we look at in-class interventions. And then one of the things that you'll actually see as part of our schedules, which Brett Colleen will talk about next, is we actually are working to embed as much support time into our schedules, even in distance learning, to provide additional support for
My
our
only
students.
question for you is, so you're saying you're to be giving support during class time? Is that
So
when
that's what teachers do yes, what they do anyway all the time. Yeah, so those in-class interventions and strategies.
But there wouldn't, okay, so let's say you've got a student that is not doing well, you would in some way, I don't want to pull, how would you intervene on that one child? Is that, I know we used to do it at Degania, where you'd had a class where there was an intervention class. That's what I'm asking you. Would there be an intervention class that they could Zoom in on to get support there?
Right. So that's some of the details that we're working out. What we're working on now is building that ability into the schedule and looking at actually during what is our school day. So some of what you may see as, although it may be that asynchronous learning or some of the independent study, is where teachers can actually have small groups and call in specific students to do those interventions. So
that's what I mean. Would there be
yes.
time in the day for that?
Yes.
Yeah,
yes,
yeah.
That's
So
what
as
we're looking
Mr.
at doing.
Colleen, yeah, sorry, Kara, I don't want to speak over you yet, but absolutely. So as Mr. Colleen is going to look at some of the bell schedules, we're going to try to embed some student support time throughout the day to try to break in and get those students some individual intervention time.
And where
that is one of our
That's what I'm asking.
greatest
Where-
concerns as well.
Right, where's the threshold? I mean, were we talking, I guess where I'm asking is, where's the threshold where we would intervene? That's my question for you.
There's all different levels. It's hard. There's not one answer. There's all different levels. So if a student, let's say, is struggling on just one topic in one class, that would indicate obviously teacher intervention. We already have in our on-campus schedules, we already have time for teachers to intervene with that type of support. So we have, at Degania, it's called CAT time,
right?
Or there is time embedded even into your normal school day. Each class. So it's those types of things will be ongoing. We do plan to continue that.
Okay.
If it's on a larger scale, we actually have all different types of intervention classes that again are all over the scale as to how we can support students. So those will all continue even as we are in the distance learning model.
And that will be between 7th and 12th, even if they're in 11th grade, you'll be able to support them, pull them out. Okay, perfect.
Yeah, I think you'll see that. And I'll actually, if it's okay, I'll kind of move on to Brett, because I think you'll see that reflected in our schedules. Is that, again, one of our biggest concerns is supporting any students who are struggling. So I'll turn it over to Brett, who can kind of explain the process for determining the schedules.
Last question. When you get the data from this, can you please make sure I guess I'll ask Rob this, that the board gets this data right away. I want to see where the kids are at and make sure we are supporting them at the district level, at the board level. Thank you.
Ms. Gibson, you had a question?
Yes, and Kara, let me know if this is correct, but I thought I would jump in before Brett came in because my questions are specific to learning loss.
Sure.
And I didn't know if we were switching targets, but there have been some reports that have come out lately. One by, I shared some of these just yesterday with Rob, Student Achievement Partners, one by the Council of City of Great Schools. And I have concern with the way the state has phrased learning loss. First, actually, I'm not even sure I like the term learning loss. One that I've heard that I prefer is unfinished learning. But also, I am concerned that schools are going to be encouraged to do vast amounts of diagnostic testing, and I don't think that that's what we need to be doing with our kids right now. I really do think, first of all, unfinished learning always happens. We always have kids rolling into the next grade level who haven't mastered every standard. Not so much in San Diego, but certainly across the educational systems. And I think what we really, some of the things that have been talked about in these reports is the importance of not holding kids back from grade level content, from remediating, just in time versus just in case. There are some things that you can find out from a diagnostic that a student missed that just might not be of a priority going forward, and the teacher waits until they're in an instructional situation and the deficit is contextualized and there's an opportunity to address it. I also worry a little bit about labeling kids as deficient. And I'm not saying that we're doing this. I'm thinking about the way the state has phrased this in terms of learning loss. kids who are deficient, kids who have fallen behind due to circumstances that were completely out of their control. And we're trying to think about how to get kids engaged in online learning. I'm concerned that if we go, spend too much of our time on diagnostics rather than formative assessment that's based in grade level standards, that's engaging for students, I have some concerns about that. So, I see where we're going as a district in terms of the universal screener. I can see its role. But in general, I'm wondering if we're communicating with teachers about that idea of the role of, we need to assess, but does that assessment mean diagnostic summative testing, or could it be a formative assessing?
So I think I can answer your question in a couple of ways. So we actually have been focusing on a district on formative assessment for a number of years, and have prioritized that, starting even at the middle school level. So when we talk about, like, you'll have heard us talk about our professional learning communities and PLCs and teachers getting together. One of their focuses is doing formative assessment that does have some consistency across the board to check students along the way. And formative assessments are, as you're talking about, checking skills as you go, so that you can then help to, as we're talking about mitigating student learning loss, right? We do that along the way anyhow. One of the concerns, of course, is in distance learning. No matter how hard we work to make sure we were connecting with all kids, there were still some that we know may have not had connections. And then keep in mind, in middle school, we have half of our students are coming from outside of our district to us every year. So although we know our feeder districts did an amazing job, we do know that there is some measurements that we need to see, kind of in case they also had some issues there. So this is something, especially at the middle school level, we do on a regular ongoing basis. But that also, even in the spring, when we went to our emergency situation, teachers moved very quickly to formative assessment because they had been trained so much, because there wasn't really a good way to do a summative assessment given the situation. So they were doing that. So moving forward, yes, that will be a discussion, is continuing to do that. What the universal screener does, though, is it really helps for us to look at the grade level standards across the board and to really understand how students are progressing with those grade level standards. So that is our measurement. It's the same goal for every student. One of the other things you talked about is making sure that we're not holding students back or anything like that. We do most of our interventions and the programs that we have are simultaneous with their courses. So we have academic lab classes, and even our college readiness classes. We have reading classes. We have all of these that are in conjunction with, along with, again, those teacher-led interventions that we're doing on a regular basis. All of this, we do plan to continue in distance learning. And in fact, we were doing some of that even in, again, the emergency situation. If you talk about our English language learner teachers in the spring, were absolutely amazing, as were our special education staff with doing additional outreach to students as needed. So they were doing that on an ongoing basis. Obviously, with what Bree shared in that graphic, all of that, the accountability is going to be even more so moving forward. So we will have more systems in place, as opposed to let's do the best we can. We now have the opportunity to put those systems in place and really help students continue to that grade level. Teachers were already talking about, before we left in the spring, knowing that they would have to build in at the beginning of this year. They will have to build in for all students lessons to address anything that they might have missed in the previous year. So that is, again, something that they will already be doing. Again, what's nice is, at the high school level, when they go from 9 through 12, our teachers already articulate across levels anyway. So our 9th grade teachers talk to our 10th grade teachers on a regular basis. They're already doing that articulation. So they already started that in the spring. And then at the middle school level, we work very closely with our elementary districts to do some of the same. So we've been in contact with them as well, to already earmark some of the students as they come in to see what supports that we can give them.
Perfect. And then just the other thing I'll say, and this is probably a good transition of what Brett's going to talk about, but in terms of the fact that we lost several months, we have a full year of academic content to teach kids. And I think by most people's assessment that distance learning can be extremely powerful, but I do have some concerns with us being able to cover the same amount of material that we would in a face-to-face situation. Are we doing, or do you think we'll plan on doing any looking at not only in assessing kids, but also in going forward and planning instruction as to, what are the most essential standards? So if we're looking at a screener, is the screener, are we going to focus our efforts if a kid's deficient in a minor standard that won't have impact in the next year's coursework, that kind of thing? Any sort of prioritizing of the most essential contents?
Yes, and again, that's something that our teachers actually do on a regular basis already with their PLC groups. And so they will address it. I think I know they've already started talking about in the learning and instruction team this summer. That was one of the groups that they were talking about. How do we make sure we're addressing those essential standards? And also what our teachers will have to do with the new distance learning format is what are the essential learning standards that they will be addressing, directly with the kids. And then what are maybe because some of the things that we do, there's knowledge and then there's skills. So there's both pairs of that. What are some of the things they could possibly do that could be a little more asynchronous and move to that, the more independent time, where they could be working even maybe on skills that then the teacher can review and that the teacher can really address the knowledge piece, or vice versa. It actually depends on the kid in the class sometimes. But all of those conversations actually already happen, have started happening, but it will have to look different moving forward. And one of the things we do want to include in our schedule is time for staff collaboration. And as Brett goes through it, I know he's going to address this. We already, again, include staff collaboration in our regular bell schedules and school days across our district. So we will look to continue that moving forward. So I'm going to go ahead and transition to Brett. I saw his face pop up, so I feel like he's ready to talk. Thank you.
Thank you, Kara. Good to see everybody. And I want to begin by thanking President Hergesheimer for taking that well-timed break. I also think it's relevant because when we think about bell schedules, we have to do it differently in a distance learning environment than we do in a traditional setting. And that includes fatigue and a need for screen time breaks from time to time. Just think of a student going for 90 minutes or 2 hours, 7 minutes later doing it again, 7 minutes later doing it again, and then doing it again. And so part of the conversation that had to happen in these teams of dedicated educators who will work in the summer is take a look at structures, that is bell schedules, that could actualize the goals that we have in the context of distance learning. And so I am very thankful to them, not only as a colleague, but I too, like some of the other people in the room, have a daughter who's a senior in our district. And so I get to see her lens and opinions on everything as well. So very enlightening, and we've learned a heck of a lot. So in those conversations, these were kind of the 3 priority areas, kind of non-negotiables, that we had to make sure a bell schedule accommodated. And like everything else right now with the pandemic, we begin with health and safety. So we have to make sure that our schedules are safe, especially if you contemplate as conditions improve, that we're going to be able to begin a return to school at some point. Which is why you might see in the schedules, rather than say a 7-minute passing period, maybe it's 10 minutes. You're going to see screen breaks in there, things like that. We want to make sure that our staff is safe as well when we get everybody on campus. Curriculum instruction, it's a lot of the same standards. However, pedagogy comes into play. That is how we teach and how students learn. And that's when we have to look at the bell schedule and say, a really, really long period of block followed by a really, really long period of block of direction instruction is not going to work in a distance learning environment. So we have to look at that research and carve up that bell schedule so that it indeed leverages how kids learn and how we teach in that environment. And then finally, student considerations. one of the big things that kids lost in the spring was connectivity. The feedback we got at the forums was that we really miss communicating with one another. We miss kind of the ethos you get when you're at school. So we've got to put structures in place that accommodate that and promote that. And one of the things you're going to see in our bell schedules as we look at them briefly is at every school in our district now, we have built-in time for student connectivity. So that's really cool. The other thing we have to recognize and appreciate is that this is a district that celebrates choice. So we have a whole high school selection process, for example, where families make educated decisions about what's best for their child. And fundamental to that decision often is the bell schedule in terms of how kids learn. So I know that the teams that looked at bell schedules discussed different options like 4x4s for all the high schools and so forth. However, if we're looking at this through the lens of what kids asked for, and it comes down to how they learn, we feel that we should honor those choices. For example, shoving a kid into a 4x4 that the kid didn't ask for is not necessarily respectful. So that's why we are recommending that we retain as much normalcy as possible, satisfy all of these goals, and support the choices that these families made. So, I wanted to make you aware of some context as we take a look at some draft bell schedules. And I want to underline draft because several of the schools in our district have worked very hard over not 1, but 2 years to come up with whole new schedules before the pandemic came along. And so again, thinking along the lines of honoring that work, thinking about returning to school.
I got through on my iPad. So I can read loud and clear.
I hear you, Joyce. It's good to have you. So honoring continuity in terms of return to school and all the work that's gone on behind the scenes to try to do a better job of connecting with our kids and making sure their teachers have a great environment to teach, learn, and learn from one another. That's why we have these draft schedules. So we can go ahead and take a look at them, and we'll begin with a middle school model, and Bree's gonna kind of share some highlights there.
Perfect. Thanks so much, Brett. Okay, so as Brett said, we really want to start by reiterating that this is still very, very much in a draft form, but we wanted to make sure something was shared this evening just so that we can, as a community, understand kind of where we're going with the thoughts for a middle school distance learning bell schedule. The other thing to note is that the development and design of this draft schedule was very much to focus on distance learning, but to also support other opportunities for return to school models with the least amount of impact possible for our kids. Brett mentioned some great topics about the key priorities, and you'll see those reflected in our middle school draft schedule, such as built-in nutrition and learning breaks, daily opportunities for synchronous live instruction, as well as asynchronistic time for targeted student supports, student wellness, and purposeful student connection opportunities. And at the middle school, what we've really been focusing on over the last few years is the social emotional learning component, utilizing our second step curriculum. We want kids to still be able to have fun at school. So talking about ASB type activities, the encouragement of participation in student clubs, and then the important aspect of intervention support for those targeted interventions that we offer at all of our middle schools to support our students just in general, but in this type of a distance learning format as well. And then last but not least, which is incredibly important, we wanted to make sure that our draft schedule showcased some type of teacher and staff collaboration and professional development time, as we are all learning in these new models, and we want to make sure that our teachers and staff are given that opportunity to continue to learn, develop, and grow in this unique environment that we're in. So again, those are just some of the highlights from our draft middle school schedule that is still in development and processing to best fit the needs of our individual sites and communities.
Thank you,
Good
Bree.
question.
Yes, Melise.
I love I love this. Thank you so much. It's easy to follow, and I love that there's a designated time for teachers to contact parents. Is there an expectation on how teachers would do that, or as a principal, would you leave that up to them, or would you suggest phone calls or emails or newsletters, or what are you thinking?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And I think there's still a lot of discussions that we're having at our individual sites, and specific with kind of what we do previously, just in normal school environments and with our culture. But I would say a combination of all those things would probably be appropriate. Phone calls, the use of our Aries tool and other messaging systems, as well as weekly newsletters from principals. Just knowing and acknowledging that this distance learning format is going to be, there's a little extra challenge with staying connected and with the communication. And that's going to be a big part of the work that we do as principals, site leaders, teachers, and staff members to make sure that we all are staying unified within our school communities. So great question. And again, still fine tuning details, but knowing that communication and connection is key with moving forward.
If I could add a little bit to that, as we transition to the Parent Square platform in Aries, it's very intuitive, much more user-friendly. You can email an entire class, an individual student and parent. You can text, organize newsletters, and we had the opportunity to do it in the spring, but we met with them literally after the whole pandemic school closure, and our main focus was not changing a communications platform in that environment. So, there'll be training and some PD for all of us to use this new platform, but it should be very intuitive.
Thank you,
Dr.
Bree.
Haley. All right, Brett, I'm going to turn it back to you to talk high school. Thanks so
Good
much.
deal. So we can shift to the next schedule. So what I'm going to do here briefly, because these are drafts, is point out how each of the high school schedules has been modified to achieve those 3 goals that I spoke about in the very first slide of my section. So these are going to look remarkably similar to a normal school day experience for our students and our teachers, but it's carved up a little bit differently to support all of those objectives. So one of the things you're going to notice in almost all of our schedules is we're going to have office hours available in the morning so that there is time for teachers to collaborate, time for outreach to families and kids. And that pushes the academic start time a tad later than normal. A lot of feedback we got from the prior experience in the spring was that for online learning, kids appreciated, staff appreciated a slightly later start time. So all of these schedules reflect that. And then as noted before, you're going to see 10 minutes between passing periods, so they get a little screen break. They're entitled to eat lunch. I think everybody deserves to do that. And then you're going to see this asynchronous time in the afternoon, which is for student learning and support. And for my school, Canyon Crest Academy, there will be teacher collaboration on that day as well. As with all of the schedules, there is a student connectivity piece, and at Canyon Crest, it's Homeroom Fridays, so a slightly different schedule there. This is going to be remarkably similar to San Diego Academy's schedule, and LCC and Torrey also have a lot of consistency. So we hope that our community really appreciates that consistency. The only difference with Canyon Crest schedules, we also have a period 5 conservatory, and those are Tuesdays through Thursdays, reflecting pretty much normalcy there. So we can move on to our next draft schedule, which is San Diego Academy. It's going to look remarkably similar to CCA. They're doing their staff collaboration in the mornings, as you can see there. And then they too have hour-long synchronous periods. They have the student learning and support in the afternoon, 10 minutes between passing periods. They've got the homeroom on Fridays. And so again, a lot of consistency there between the academies and reflecting the elements from what was important to us in a distance learning context. So we can move on to LCC and Torrey. Here's Torrey in Torrey colors. This was one of the schools, I think SDA, TP, and LCC were all working behind the scenes on new schedules before the pandemic hit. So these are going to reflect that work as well. But what you see here structured just slightly different from the academies is they've grouped the synchronous time in the same block as asynchronous time, but they're not going to be teaching that entire period of time direct instruction synchronous activity, because as we've experienced, that leads to lots of fatigue. And so they're going to shut it down, as it says there, up to 50 minutes of that before they shift to more independent practice, support, and check-in. They've got screen breaks in there. And then new for Torrey Pines High School this coming year is student connectedness. And because Mr. Copa likes alliteration, they've got Wellness Wednesdays for that. Then if we take a look at, and then the other distinction, I'm sorry if we go back to that, is their period 1 is now their daily period that meets every day, not the longer block. And so that will continue. And then if you take a look at LCC.
Can I just ask,
Sure.
this kind of applies to a lot of these different, but like, for example, when you do that first hour, when the teachers are doing office hours, check-ins, tutoring, et cetera, are they apt to have a set day? I mean, if they're doing meetings, you know, they're not available for student check-in. You know, are they going to have some sort of system?
Great question, Beth. We'll work that out with each site, but on the days that, and it's usually one day a week that schools have like a PLC, professional learning community day, a staff meeting, something like that, then we would make it up in the morning on the other side. And then all those afternoons where there's student learning support time, that's available for the students, to support the students. So it's usually one day a week that we have the staff collaboration, and we need it to support this work. So LCC also has a new schedule, and this reflects it, but through a distance learning lens. And they've got student connectivity time, which is new for them, and this is great. And the way they've structured it is on the 1, 3, 5, 7 days, that student connection time is going to be a screen break, but the next day, which is on the 2, 4, 6 day, that's going to be programmed activity from student connectivity, as it's noted there, MAVNation, other activities, SEL, social emotional learning activities, etc. So that's new for them. But what I love about these drafts, and I know there's still collaboration behind the scenes on finalizing all of these, lots of consistency, lots of structure. They meet those 3 areas that were focus areas for us, so that it maximizes students' opportunity to be successful in this context. The other thing I'll say is, if, as was noted earlier, is if we do a gradual phased return to school, these schedules, we would be able to flex to accommodate that.
So Brad, I have a question. Is
Yeah.
when will this go up so the parents can see this and the kids can see it?
Well, it's public now with draft written across it. Just speaking for my school, just kind of going back to what I said before, when we make changes, substantive changes to Bell schedules, these are thoughtful, collaborative processes that often take a year. And so we're doing this rapidly as we learn more and more about distance learning. And so we also want to respect collaboration. So there is some fine tuning going on behind the scenes, but we're going to have these done as a practical matter very shortly anyway.
And Brad, if I could just jump in real quick, there's also just a little bit of tweaking that will probably have to occur, just regards to some of the state requirements around scheduling minutes and whatnot, but it should not be major, but just a few minor tweaks here or there.
So can we put those on the district website? I think that would be good to get the parents to know ahead of time that you've been working diligently and this is where we're going in this direction. I think that'd be helpful.
Yes, this will be posted tonight at the conclusion of the meeting. It's public in that we're live right now. And as Brett said, we do need to do some fine tuning. We need to do, it's interesting. There are advantages sometimes of being in this virtual distance learning world, scheduling meetings, but it's not always as easy to get all the stakeholders together and everybody getting the information at the right time. So we want to circle back with our teachers and our teacher association. We want a lot of different eyes on this to make sure that we're all in agreement for each school as to what looks best.
Do the teachers feel that this is a good schedule for them?
The teachers were heavily involved in developing these drafts, and they'll be heavily involved in moving from draft to final versions.
Thank you. Good.
Hey,
Thank you.
good
And-
question.
Yeah, Melise.
Regarding
We do have one
special-
more to share.
Yeah, we have our
okay.
5th high school.
Oh, sorry. Oh, gosh, sorry. Maybe I'm jumping in too quickly, but as far as special ed students, do you guys want to elaborate on how the schedule may work for them with, especially kids not being able to sit for certain amounts of time? And my second question is, synchronous instruction doesn't necessarily mean screen time, right?
Right. It's synchronous instruction means that allocation of time is there for learning activities, direct learning activities with kids in that moment. But the nature of those activities could be very different. There could be some direct instruction. There could be breaking off to groups, coming back, a lot of that. So it's not like direct instruction the entire time.
We're trying to replicate what it would look like if we were physically in a classroom, because we've put in a lot of work into what is the structure of a period. For instance, we always talk about a welcoming ritual, and we can do that online. An engaging activity right away to get kids thinking and interacting. There may be some period of live instruction. Then kids might break off into working in projects. And just as we would wrap things up at the end of the period, I'd like to see where everybody comes back together. If we've got, I'm looking at LCC, from 8 to 9:20, well, maybe from 8:45 to 9:10, kids are working independently or in small groups, or maybe the teacher's working one-on-one. But at 9:15, everybody comes back together in that synchronous end, so we can say, hey, here's how we're closing. This is your homework for tonight, or wherever the case may be. I think that'll give our students that mental structure of, when did period one end or begin, and when did period one end, and our teachers will know that the student wasn't checking out, that they were there participating for the entire period. I think that's important.
Yeah. And to your question, Melise, about special education, the nice thing about these schedules is they do replicate normalcy to a large degree in terms of courses of support for our students. So we're still going to have co-teaching, for example, in those special education gen ed classes that we've identified that would be beneficial. We're still having case management. We have space built in here for IEPs, 504s, SSTs, it's whatever we need to do. And obviously we're hopeful that conditions will improve where we can have a return to school sooner as opposed to later, so that those populations of students who struggle at home can be back on our campuses.
And just one more thing that I do want to show the 5th one, Melise, to directly answer your question. Our teachers, it's going to be harder because, well, they're going to know some of their students, but a lot of their students are going to be new. But if I build up a relationship, and I know Brett is a good learner, but about every 15 minutes, Brett has got to go run around the block, that's still going to be allowed, right? The teacher's still going to know that individual student. Brett, you do need to go run around the block.
Thank you.
Or ride your bike, ride the bike.
I do too. I'm one of those people.
I mean, I'm feeling screen fatigue right now. I got to be honest. So I'm
So I have a
literally
question.
processing this.
Okay, Brett, I have a question for you.
Okay, Mo.
Okay, so let's say the student's only taking 5 classes. Is that you've got the student learning and support at the end. So let's say let's say they're just not taking the last class. How would they then get into the support? Or where would the support be? Or would they have to go back online?
Well, it depends on the student's schedule. I mean, for every student, there is obviously synchronous class time and then asynchronous support. So whatever the school day doesn't end in terms of support just because the student's schedule ends at a certain time.
Right.
Our resources are there to help kids. So I don't see that as an issue.
But
it would be the same as it is now.
Yeah.
I'd like to ask a question. I know you spoke to trying to meet the students where they're at in terms of having selected schools that were on 4x4s or on a more traditional schedule. I know we've had at least a few communications from parents and so forth. Did we get much in the way of input or what do I want to say, like a change in tenor from parents of whether they would feel their kids are good with 6 periods or 7 periods or need a lesser number for juggling? Any input that was received on that?
As a site principal, I didn't get that level of input. However, this goes beyond San Diego, and I've been collaborating with districts all over Southern California who wanted to learn, for example, what's a 4x4 like. What they're confronted with is not just the substantive issue of change when kids didn't expect it, but the logistics at this stage of the game of trying to take a master schedule that is conflict-free, where kids get everything they wanted, and then redo it, ultimately resulting in lots of conflicts and kids wouldn't get what they want. So there are practical implications as well that I know districts, particularly in Orange County that I was talking to recently, are now struggling with. And so we just strongly felt that, again, if you look at high school selection, you know how thorough that process is. And to take something away from them where they made a decision about a schedule and how they learn, we didn't think was right.
And we know that there are, I mean, we've looked at some of the districts that have done changes to their schedule, and it may work for them, but it's not yet worked. And having a plan on paper may be different than what really occurs in practicality. One of my guiding principles in all of this, and I've shared with staff, share right now, is as much as we can mirror what we would do in the physical world, in the virtual world, allows us to pivot back and forth. The more we customize one against the other, the less able we are to pivot back and forth. And so I really think, you know, we gave strong consideration to looking at different models, but I think we've hit on the right place.
All right, I want to let Ms. Gibson. I see Ms. Gibson. I just want to make maybe an added comment. I think I understand that in that, you know, for example, I also have heard from other school boards and districts where they've said, oh, we already had this distance learning program and it's working so great, and all you have to do is do what we're doing. And it's like, but those were families who had selected that before. And that's, so I do understand what you're saying, different students, different styles, and we've been trying to reach them. Ms. Gibson had a question, please.
A very technical and quick one. And I may have missed something because I've got a little bit of Zoom fatigue going on over here. But this schedule would be, these would be launched when we begin with distance learning on August 25th. Do these schedules continue if students move it back onto campus?
Why don't you hold that and I'll address that later.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you. Well, how about if we check out Sunset and they'll have their beautiful new campus. Obviously, Sunset
is on track.
Excellent. This is their draft schedule, and you'll see that, again, reasonable periods of time for asynchronous learning and independent pacing, which is integral to their model anyway. They've got that built-in advisory that is a huge culture and support piece there. And again, staff collaboration to help kids. So I feel like all of these proposed draft Bell schedules, I believe, honor the identified areas that we think are important in terms of kids being successful in a distance learning context. If we go to the next slide, I think this is critically important because since this is a new way of teaching and learning, you know what, we have to learn constantly how to do this. And so ed services and teacher leaders from throughout our district, administrators have been collaborating, and it's already out there, identifying the week of August 10th through the 14th for professional development in these areas. And it's going to begin with kind of an umbrella course, so to speak, on distance learning 101, and letting teachers know what the resources are to help grow in those areas. And then they're going to be able to identify pathways that they want to concentrate on if given certain areas of distance learning that they want to learn more about. So I was in a meeting today where there was great planning going on to make this a really quality program for our teachers. And then if we go to the last slide, we know, and this was mentioned earlier, we cannot do this without a partnership with our parent community, especially when kids are home. It's happening in my house. So you can expect as parents to get detailed orientation, training updates, how together we can navigate this and support our kids. We learned a lot in the spring, like I can just speak for my school when we did coffees about our distance learning plan. We had hundreds and hundreds of parents and had to do multiple coffees, and it was awesome. But we may have to, we're just gonna have to do our outreach in diverse ways to make sure that we engage everybody and hear from our parents about what is working on the parent side in terms of supporting their kids. So that's in the planning works, and at least we have some tools to do it. It's not as easy as when we can gather personally, but we're getting better, I think, at finding ways to interface with our parent community. And that's instruction and learning.
So I have a question. You're talking about the coffees. Are you going to bring back the virtual coffees, and would you take questions online? Because I think parents would really appreciate that.
Yeah, Mo. Yeah, it depends on the scope of the how many people are going to come in. There are sometimes limitations to Google Hangouts or Zoom. We learned, like we ran a couple that had almost 250 in each. And one thing that did help us is we sent out a Google form in advance to let the community know these are the topics, or what are the topics of importance to you. So then we put our presentation around those topics. And then set up a few Hangouts. But so we'll be able to do that, but I think we may have to live stream some and set up a separate chat, like through Google Live time Google Slides, so that we could see the questions coming in. We just have to get creative with the tech tools we have.
Right. That'd be great if you could answer some emails coming in. The parents would feel like they're more connected with the community. I do have to say is that I know that parents were watching the your online every Friday when you put stuff out. I know you had a lot of parents watching that. So that would be great. Thank you.
And Mo, you actually have a good point. To the extent that we could do more outreach that hits a lot of the major concerns, the fewer emails we might get. I don't know about you guys, but the email load has just launched.
Yeah,
So
right.
Joyce has a question.
Yeah,
Okay.
I do. I'm wondering, I think it's a good idea to have a dedicated helpline at each school where parents call in if they're having serious difficulty with their students, serious difficulty with helping out with any of the curriculum, connectivity issues. Heaven knows I can relate to that. Kids skipping class, just making themselves known at the beginning of class and then leaving, and also depression. Could that be established at each school?
I'd be happy to look into that. Thank you, Joyce.
Thanks.
Yeah.
I love that suggestion, and sorry to jump in, but as far as Joyce brought up skipping school, what will the policy be as far as kids having their video on? Just so they're present, the teachers kind of know what they're doing, just like they would if they were in class. And do you have any thoughts about where teachers will be teaching from?
Okay, so in terms of will they be present, we are still working out those details prior to our professional development coming up. So I don't have a hard and fast answer for you at the moment. But part of the requirements, it's not just attendance, it's engagement. And so to be engaged, you have to be present, and we have to be able to confirm that. And then dealing with privacy issues. So Joel Van Hooser's been outstanding in helping with ed services and our staffs with understanding what we can and cannot do and figuring out a way to yes.
Brett, I'm sorry, I misunderstood. What did you say about where the teaching is going to take place? You said you're still thinking about it, the
Oh,
teachers
no.
being on site?
I did not address that. I'll leave that to Dr. Haley.
Okay, Thank you.
Yeah, we're gonna cover that.
Okay, but I
Okay.
have,
So moving forward,
I have a question, and this
Yes.
may have been covered again. What do we do regarding illness of teachers who can't do the live streaming from their homes or from school? How will we cover for that?
Cindy can actually address that.
So as we're going to work with each one of those teachers on an individual basis. It will depend on their particular circumstances. And so each one is going to be an individual case by case situation. Without kind of going into any further details in regard to that, we're going to try to work with teachers, but at the same time, there may be some instances where some teachers may not be able to actually do that instruction from home. And at the same time, we need to be able to ensure that we have rigor from that online instruction if they're working from home.
Great.
Cindy,
Good.
can you address like working with our substitutes in the distance learning model?
Absolutely. So one of the things we're going to be doing is working with Ed Services to also invite our substitutes to these trainings. And we were also investigating putting together a training video for our substitutes to also be able to take as they're trying to learn about coming on and doing the distance learning about doing Google Meets. And that will be something that we think is very, very important because some of our subs haven't worked in this particular environment.
So I have a question. What about the classes where people are saying that we don't accept them, but they're UC approved? Are we going to approve more classes for online? How is that going to work?
Are you speaking of students taking classes?
Yes, I guess this is directed to Rob, since we're having a round robin here. Is that
Yeah, so
a lot of the parents are saying that the kids are taking classes online at other institutions, and a lot of these are UC approved, which they will accept for college, and we are not accepting those classes back to our high school. What are we going to do about that now?
At this point in time, I don't know that we are going to propose changing that. And I think it depends on the circumstances. So we have a rule that if we're going to transfer a class onto our transcript, it has to be a credit earning class. And I know we have heard from a particular person, and I think, Brett I believe has interacted with this person, that the course that they took, it doesn't provide credit. It's not a credit earning course.
That's not the parent, excuse me, but
Okay,
that's
I'm
not
just
the parent
saying, yes.
talking about.
Secondly,
Okay, go ahead.
Secondly, I think we could look at, as we always have, exceptions to the rule in 2021 because we're outside of something that's typical. But I guess the question would be, what's the need? We're offering a full range of classes, and I guess we would have to see what is the need for importing different classes onto our transcript. There's no limitation on students taking as many classes online as they want. The question is, how many would we allow to be imported onto our transcript?
Okay, so I want to make sure I understand this. So who would they speak to? So I think it is if they're taking a UC class, which would transfer to the UC system. I think that's understandable. And you say, I think we have a great, a barrage of classes, but for whatever reason, someone wants to take another class, which we don't offer, and they may not offer it. There are different classes at, let's face it, LCC as opposed to Torrey Pines or CCA. And so I think we should reconsider that if the kids aren't getting what they want, and who would they contact?
Well, it sounds like that we could be flexible with that, but it also is, I think, just to make sure we're clear, those are classes they can get the college credit. We're just saying we're not applying it towards their graduation.
And not only that, they can submit as many transcripts as they want on a college application. The concern we have is how many off-campus, out of organization classes we allow to be imported onto our transcript. We are having discussions about that, and that's something that would involve, our school principals, our counselors, and through our administrative services department.
So who would they contact? Who should I tell the parent to contact to see if you're going to accept a UC class?
Mark,
Who
would that
need-
be your office?
It would always be their counselor. So they would need to check with the counselor at their school site.
Okay,
Like,
well, they
if
say
we're-
the
if we're gonna
counselors are not
consider
in.
being more flexible, would
counselors will
that
be
be
in
an
next week.
actionable item from the
Okay.
board? And we're not meeting again until the end of August, so that's kind of a
Right.
concern. Kids are picking classes.
I think it's a real concern when kids now are picking classes, is that we don't want to overload them, but if it's something that they will excel at, I think we should be, I think Melissa's right, we should need to have a discussion about that
But
sooner
we-
than later.
It maybe correct me, but we allow currently, it's like 6 classes that they can bring in.
No, I think it's 3.
3-year long, so 30 credits. But again, there's no limitation on how many other classes they want to take. It's just what we're willing to, most districts have a cap. You can only import so many credits from outside onto that district's transcript. I mean, keeping in mind, these are courses offered in other schools, not ours.
Correct.
So,
And we always try to maintain the integrity of our transcript, which is why
Right.
we currently have that in place. And I would say 30, it's very generous in terms of other districts I've worked in. It's actually has been less.
so what's the answer here? Because what do you say?
Well, the counselors will be back next week. That's the first point of contact regarding an off-campus class.
Okay, and so there will be some sort of deliberation if it's going to be accepted. I want to make sure I understand. Or they contact Mark's office, because the
Well, they
kids
would
now
start
are
with the
choosing
counselor.
classes. Okay, start with the counselor.
Yeah,
A
always
lot of
start
kids
with
now
their counselor.
are picking, well, they've been trying to, and the counselor's been out. There's been a lot of consternation about this. And I just want to make sure I give them correct information. And I can see where they're coming from. That's been a very disruptive year for them.
Yeah, I can see how a parent might say, hey, this is a UC approved course and you get college credit. That would look really great for your transcript considering all that's been going on in the world. I really would encourage you to take this. And then they find out it's not on the approved list. So maybe an expedited appeal,
That's good,
situation or
Melissa.
form or something.
I think I don't understand the issue, because again, from my perspective, the university that they want to go to can see the transcript of what they took, even if it's not on our transcript. So
Yeah, but if they need an English class to graduate and we're not going to count it, or if they already took their 3 classes before they knew there was a global pandemic,
Right.
I mean, I
Well,
don't
see,
know.
that-
that goes to
that's
the,
part of the
Melise, that goes to
discussion.
the heart of the matter, because, we have our core curricular offerings that we believe a student in San Diego needs to take. And so we don't want a student taking, 3 years worth of English, not on our campus, that they're importing into our transcript. I think we need to be very careful about doing that. And any student that takes, whether through BYU or UCLA, I mean, my daughter took AP Stats through Cal Berkeley, their online high school. That transcript exists, and she got to submit that to the college that she applied to. So there's no limitation on that. It's just how many we are going to transpose onto our transcript.
I think in the vein of being flexible and giving families freedom, if we could, look at it on a case by case basis, maybe with a little more generosity this year, then obviously we want to maintain the integrity of our diploma. I don't think we would ever waver on that. But if it's accredited and it's, there's a good case for it, can we communicate to our counselors that we'll look at that in maybe a more flexible light than perhaps in the past?
I think our staff has indicated that. I'm a little concerned about time now, and I don't know how much more we need in the way having presentation with additional conversations. So maybe I could redirect.
I think what Molly said about an appeal, I think that's a good thing to say. I think this is a unprecedented time period. And if kids, because right now they can't reach their counselor, and if they sign up for a class thinking that I'll transfer and it doesn't, there's got to be some sort of process for that. Thank you.
Okay, we're going to move along. Next steps. So we have had a lot of information, but we do need to consider some next steps. So if we can move forward. So just to reiterate, we meet weekly with San Diego County Health and Human Services, and that will continue. They've been very helpful. One of the things that they do is they take the questions that we have as superintendents, the practicalities of working with our students, and they take that to the California Department of Public Health on a regular basis. They've been very receptive to assisting us where we need clarity or, quite frankly, lobbying for things that we want changed. So then this addresses some of the questions that we heard earlier. Following public health orders, schools and district offices are open for employees, however, not for the public, unless an essential service is being delivered that cannot be done remotely. This is directly from Health and Human Services, San Diego County. And so an example would be, and they've already clarified because they know the special education community has significant problems and concerns in this distance learning world. So they've already used as an example, a special education assessment could be an essential service that cannot be done remotely. And so there are other essential services that we've done in the past, such as serving food. They see that as an essential service, or distributing Chromebooks or other technology. If it can be done remotely, that would be their preference. If it cannot be, we can provide that service on one of our campuses. So then that follows to consider how and when more employees will return to work sites. That's been a gradual phase in, and that's something that's been an ongoing process. We do want to show that our schools and our district is open, where we can still provide, service via distance or remotely, depending upon what it is. We can and still would do that. We want to make sure that we account for all of the rules and guidelines that we have to follow with our employees. And again, earlier in the presentation, you've heard the work that Cindy and Tina have done, primarily with their two focus areas at all of our sites, including where I'm at right now in the district office. We have to have posted our plan, and we have to show that we're following our plan and reminding our employees that we need to follow our plan. And so that will continue. There is a conversation, going on, not just in San Diego, but around the state about, teaching and learning. And, we'll consider that. And certainly Health and Human Services would support on a voluntary or, for those teachers who need to be in their rooms, this public health order supports that. They can be in their rooms and teach from their rooms. And so we know that just like there are students that have less than suitable learning environments, there are teachers that might have less than suitable learning environments. 20-something Rob Haley might have wanted to be in his classroom at Concord High versus, in his small room in a house that he shares with other people. So, that's a hot topic, and I don't know that, tonight we need to fully address it, but we can say for certain, based upon tonight, where we're at with Health and Human Services, we can allow instruction to take place from a teacher's classroom. And way back at the beginning, that balancing the complexity, our students have needs, our families have needs, our staff has needs, and just the overall health of our community and our society has needs. And we need to balance all of those things out and take all of that into account. So, we'll look at that as we move from now through our professional development and into August 25th. I truly want to make sure that we do this collaboratively and that we do this in a way that honors the professionalism of everybody who's working and what their needs are. And it does consider in the health order, that if work can be done remotely, that is an option for us to consider, within working with our site supervisors and at the district level with our supervisors here. We have offices that are less than ideal. In business services, we do need to restrict how many people can be in that office at any given time. In our payroll department, which is inside that office, essentially a large closet, we wouldn't necessarily want to fill that up with people. And so some of our offices, even at the school sites, don't necessarily allow for good physical spacing. The big four remain masks, spacing, sanitation, and symptom checking. That's basically what we have to ensure along with other things, but those are the big four for all of our employees as they come back. to work. Did I hear a question, Mo?
Well, I know that Google went to at home for all their employees at this point, and it's working for them. Has it not worked for you having our employees at home? And
It's a
and remotely
balance. I
working?
mean, there are some services that can't be done from home. I mean, cleaning and disinfecting and so
Well, I
I
meant
think that's
you were
what we do. We
talking
need to
about-
balance.
You were talking about your office specifically or HR. Is that not working, having them work remotely?
It's interesting. There are still things that at the state requires us to do with ink signatures. There's equipment that we have that we use that we can't take to somebody's house. So it has
Right.
been working. And I think for some departments, the work translates better to distance than for others. And also, even if we're not talking about teachers, if we're talking about our support staff, not all of them have great environments that they want to necessarily be in. And I think we need to be cautious about ordering somebody to turn their home environment into their work environment. So I think it's a balance with both. I think we need to approach it kind of like earlier, case by case. Do we think classrooms are a great place for instruction to take place? Yes. Is that necessarily the right solution for everybody? No. And if somebody can fully get their work done remotely and that can allow somebody else to be in an office who can't do it fully remotely, then that's something we can weigh out. I would say overall, it's been a pretty successful transition.
Okay, so I have a question for you. Did you just say, maybe I misunderstood what you were saying. So what are you recommending, that teachers teach from the classroom or teach from home? Because you've kind of gone back and forth a little bit.
I'm not prepared to recommend either at this point. I think that's something that we can work over the next, we almost still have an entire month. What we can say is that based on the current public health order and our direct contact with HHS, because I've had a lot of teachers email me, they want to be in their rooms, that is allowed.
Okay. How many teachers is that? What number are we talking about?
I don't have a number.
Are we talking maybe 50, 100, or less than 50?
I wouldn't even speculate. I don't
No,
know.
that you said you've gotten emails from.
Oh, 10 or 15.
10 or 15. Okay. And what is the consensus from the teachers? Did the teachers want to come back and teach in the classroom, or do they want to be at home?
Both. I mean, both. That's what we're saying.
Because the parents want to know what we're thinking or when this is going to be decided. I've gotten a lot of emails, and so it'd be helpful if we kind of had a direction tonight.
Well, I don't think we should do that. That would not be my advice.
Okay.
I mean, there's still, we get changes in the health. I mean, this could all be changed tomorrow. I mean,
Okay.
everything we're sharing tonight could be blown up. I mean, if we had this meeting 3 weeks ago, we would be talking about an entirely different set of circumstances. So I think we need to be sensitive. Look, I get it. I mean, I want to meet, as I said, balancing that. What are the needs of our students? What are the needs of our support staff? What are the needs of our teachers? What are the needs of our families? All of these are important. And I think the fewer mandates that we have and the more compassion and case by case examination of our situation, the better off we'll be.
Oh, no, I just wanted information to give. You were talking about, we're having this discussion. I thought I had misunderstood you. I was just trying to get more information from you. Thank you.
Understood. Yeah, no problem. Okay, moving forward. So this is important and ties back again as well. I have the opportunity to be involved at the state level and participating in meetings and with pretty good sources. We are anticipating a new guideline to be released again by the California Department of Public Health that outlines when some small group instruction can take place on campus and in return for some students rather than the current blanket moratorium. And in the recommendation that I provided, it's really that list. It's special education, it's English language learners, I wrote students in unsuitable learning environments that you could, interpret as socioeconomically disadvantaged, and then lastly, all students, if there's an activity that can take place on a campus and done safely and following the guidelines, there is an importance, teenagers need to connect. And so I do believe over time, maybe not all at once, we're going to see some guidance. The second point there, our own County Health and Human Services has pointed out that day camps are still allowed, and they wanted to be very clear their interpretation of what that is for a school. It's not outside groups. It's a true day camp following the day camp guidelines to benefit the students from that school. Now, often people think of day camp as maybe sports oriented or extracurricular. Currently under discussion is, for instance, could there be an English language learner day camp that met every Wednesday and they got extra tutoring or extra support? That's the kind of thinking I appreciate as this has evolved, our Health and Human Services Department really being willing to engage and be creative, knowing, as we've said earlier, there's lots of aspects to health, especially for our teenagers. And so anyway, so I'm not proposing anything right now regarding day camps because we are working with other districts and we are working with the county. I would anticipate if the California Department of Public Health issues new guidelines for small groups, that it'll probably follow that day camp guidance. We're not talking anytime soon about 35 students being in a classroom. We're talking about small groups. The unsuitable learning environment might be, we could accommodate students in some of our larger spaces, our learning commons, where they would have access to technology and the network. So these are the kinds of things that we're looking at moving forward. With that said, we'll keep going. So that means we really have to continue, and you heard just way back to the beginning of this as we shifted into the focus areas and operations and health and safety. We will have a template that we will have to go through that will be public, that everybody will see before we start bringing these different types of groups that you see here. Special education might be small groups. As I said, there might be some in-person support for English language learners. We would want to make sure our support staff and our teaching staff, we were all working together on what the conditions were going to be. And it'll look very much exactly like the California Department of Public Health's guidance and requirements. That is what San Diego has said we will follow. That is what the template that they originally put out and are modifying will mirror. A lot of people ask about masks, and as I said earlier, we will follow the mask guidance, we will follow the physical distancing guidance, but these are the groups that I would anticipate. So if we move forward, there you go. More than ever, San Diego Union High School District is committed to the future. I got to tell you, I wake up sometimes in the morning and I'm just not sure what world I live in. And I went into this profession because I love teaching kids. I love being with students. I love engaging with, my fellow professionals. I have an immense amount of respect for our support staff that has been working night and day to make modifications. Mentioned earlier in the presentation, Joel Van Hooser hasn't had any time off, just almost this entire year. We started off with the ransomware attack, went into the online, student database hacking, and then shifted into this world, and his staff, and we've got some of them here today, have done an amazing job. John Adelman and his team and facilities, and looking at all the ways we can modify our facilities. I want to make sure everybody understands the professionalism of our classified staff is at one of the highest levels that I've ever worked with. I should see our nutrition services department, all of them. I don't want to leave anybody out. I have an immense amount of respect for all of our classified support staff and the work they do to support our teachers being in classrooms. And if our teachers are not going to be in their real physical classroom, they're going to support them being in their distance learning classroom. And I have an immense amount of respect for, our certificated staff, and we are really committed to making sure everybody sees and understands that if we have to be in this distance learning world, it's going to be the very best distance learning world we can create for our students. And I believe that 100%. And I think hopefully you saw that tonight.
All right. I don't want to delay the discussion too much. Maybe just to put in, what do they call it, a parking lot topic is, you mentioned food services, and I've been seeing items about perhaps loss of federal funding for food services. So something we need to maybe be updated on in the not too distant future if anything occurs there. Otherwise, do we have other?
And if Tina, if you want to unmute real quick, I mean, I know this has been long, but we've wanted to report to the board, fully, and we address all your questions. And we need, as we get into next week and our counselors returning, all of our principals are planning on rolling out more information to their school community. We know that's important. So people now need to see the work that we've been doing operationalized at the school site. But with nutrition services as well, I mean, I could let Tina explain. We have a plan in place. Last year, we went to 2 sites. Even in the distance learning world, we're still going to need to provide meals. So Tina, do you want to kind of highlight what that might look like? We may have missed it.
Yeah, sure. So ultimately, you saw some of the bell schedules, and part of that finalization is making sure that there's going to be enough time for families that need it to be able to get to campuses in order to pick up meals. In a distance world, we were looking at last year, like Dr. Haley said, we were using 2 school sites. We are going to be open on all of our campuses so that we can eliminate people having to travel from any one place and time to get to a school that may be a little farther than where their home may be. But we are looking at opening across all of our campuses and providing meals at all of our campuses. And we'll probably do similar fashion. And we're waiting to see what the bell schedules look like, but we will probably do similar fashion where we would do 2 days a week, and we would have meal pickup for 2 days like we did in the spring. Families would pick up 2 breakfasts, 2 lunch, and then on a second day during the week, they would pick up 3 breakfasts and 3 lunch. And so we looking at that, but across all of our campuses. And Ms. Hergesheimer, you had talked about potentially less dollars coming in from federal reimbursements. Last year, there was a lot of impact to our nutrition services program, and part of the one-time federal dollars that they've provided us is to help us lessen that impact. And so we are watching. Marlene Nelms, the director, over the course of the last 2 years, has really been looking at staffing and maximizing where we can. And so over time, she's also made some increased efficiencies in the department to help with some of that. And we're continuing to do that. But our utmost priority, regardless of the dollars coming in, is to make sure that those families that need it the most are still provided with the meals that they need.
I have 2 questions for Rob. Rob?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, my 2 questions are, I don't think you really touched on the special needs students. How are we going to handle their schedule going back, or the ATP program? And then also, what about the students if we go back onto campus and they want to stay virtual? What are we going to do about that? If you could answer those 2 questions, I'd appreciate it.
The COAST program, as it is now known, COAST Academy, we have a specific request into County Health and Human Services to get a ruling, if you will, on that. I mean, these are adults and their program is work-based. So that's something that I think we could look at. In regards to special ed, we are advocating that special ed students be allowed to come on campus to get related services as needed that can't be delivered remotely. And also within the context, most of our students are in the course milieu. So I don't know if Brett or Kara or Bree want to unmute. I mean, we're going to make, in the distance learning environment, we're going to have to follow, I guess, their IEP via the distance learning environment.
Because those kids are really struggling, the kids that are special.
Absolutely. And I agree.
How can we support that?
HHS is lobbying very hard that special ed as a group be allowed to return to campus, if not fully, those who need it most. And if not all day, some amount of time. Right now, we can't do it. Right now, it's not allowed. Go ahead, Karen.
Yeah, I was
Okay,
just
go
going to
ahead.
say, Mo, that's obviously a priority for us. We worked with some stuff in the emergency situation in the spring, and it took us a while to get it going, but there were some things that did work. But I know also Tiffany Hazelwood, our director of special ed, has been doing a lot of work over the summer as well, to kind of find out exactly what we can and cannot do, and also how we implement that in the fall. So that'll be part of our planning. As you saw in the slides, there were specific groups working with that and talking about that throughout the
No,
summer.
Actually, that slide, you didn't even go over it really. It was just like, woof. The sunset slide, we kind of went by, but where there really wasn't a special needs slide that directly talked about how you're going to implement anything.
No, but that's what I'm saying is, if in the slides where we talked about the focus groups and that we're working over the summer, that has been one of our focuses, along with any of our special programs. So there is still a lot to be worked out on that, which I acknowledge.
I know.
But
I'm just
that's
telling you,
it's also in the schedule. Again, whenever you see those extra supports, we do anticipate that any of our students who would need extra support would get that. And we acknowledge that some of those students, quite a few of those students, may be students with special needs. So we can actually address part of the bottom, which it may have not been clear, in fact, of the schedules when they have that the learning time, is to provide additional time for our support providers as well. So they have that additional time with the students. So that's also built into the schedules.
Okay, I think it would be helpful if you gave a schedule of all the schools, if we could give them a schedule too, so that they could see when that support is available or what time everything is. Because I didn't see it tonight, and that's why I'm asking you. I'm not trying to challenge you, but I didn't see it.
Of course.
And you're talking about it. Is that, can we have a separate slide just for them to send out to the parents? Thank you.
So we'll have a lot of communication to go out with all the parents, and we always do, specifically address that. We've actually even talked about, and this is just at my site so far, so we haven't quite gotten there as far as across the district, but we've also already started talking about possibly doing a special orientation for any students that we know will need additional support going in, or just who may have a different type of schedule even. So in addition to our regular orientation, doing more with those students. So it's in discussion already.
I just got to tell you, I'm getting a lot of emails that their parents, that their children are not doing well. And so that's why, is what they email me, I want to have a response ready. So thank you.
And that's, and that'll be part of our information whenever we put it. In fact, as Brett showed that or Brett shared that the parent orientation and the parent education, all of that type of thing, that will definitely be one of our priorities, because it is for us as well.
Okay, so when can they expect that to get some sort of, they can get outreach? I know you're busy, but I think that is a population that has kind of been underserved. And so where or who would they contact, or when will that be available?
Right. So the first, I think, is you guys are about to consider is, it'll start with us knowing for sure that we are going into distance learning, because we are now functioning on that, but you guys have to vote for that first. So once that happens, that'll also put some things in motion. There is a lot that is going to happen within the next 2 weeks of time, a lot of things that are going to happen. And we can now start communicating to our parent communities. It's an odd time too. Keep in mind, we're still in July. We actually don't usually do a lot of outreach in July. And then as it turns out this year, things have changed, as Dr. Haley has mentioned multiple times, so rapidly. We also were just waiting to see what was next so that we can give a really concise plan. There are some districts who have been continuing throughout, and then 3 days later, the parents are getting a completely different model or a completely different thing. I've seen evidence of that. So we also want to be really careful with whatever we put out is what our plan actually is, and we can follow it, which also goes back to our schedules being allowable for whatever flexibility we need for, Dr. Haley talked about the different models of when we could even get small groups on campus. Those schedules actually allow for that. And that's what we're in process of right now. So.
Well, I think even that one parent had stated that, she was listening and she said, I didn't know any of this is going on. I think having no communication sounds like we're not doing anything. So I think having a little bit would be better. Thank you.
All right, so I know that there's a lot of topics we've discussed that I'm sure we'll be coming back, getting some more information. Dr. Haley and I have talked a little bit about whether we have another meeting such as this that's special for updates, you know, as we move forward. But I believe I'm ready at the very least to get a motion on the table if we had a few
You
other.
have the motion
questions.
in the second.
Oh, that's right. Did we?
Yep, we have a
Thank
motion.
you.
in a
I
second.
don't, what?
Oh, I believe it. It was hours ago, but I'll take your word for it. Do we have other questions? And I'm not seeing any other hands from board members to at least address the motion on the table.
Can you
It doesn't-
can you reiterate that motion, please?
I will. And then, and I'm just going to remind you though, that doesn't mean that none of these other topics can't be revisited, but just to get this motion dealt with. I need a motion to operate on the distance learning model for the entirety of the first quarter of the 2020-2021 academic year.
You say.
And consistent with the California Department of Public Health mandate guidelines and the San Diego County Public Health Order, when the district is allowed to bring students on campus, although remaining in the distance learning model, by prioritizing special education students, English language learners, high-risk students, students with inadequate learning environments, and then all other students. So if we're ready for the vote, I would ask Ms. Schultz to, let's see, do a roll call, please.
I'm sorry, can you say the first quarter, you're saying the first quarter of school would be online?
Correct.
Would
And
be
how
the
many days?
distance learning model.
Okay, and so, but we would flip back if we were able to, and how many days is that exactly? Would that be
Approximately 45 days.
45
of
days?
Instruction.
But when you say flip, what we expect
I'm
is
saying-
that it would still be the distance learning program with as many people as possible and allowable brought back onto campus. But prioritizing in the order we have in here.
But if we were, and if the county were to say we could go back to on campus, we would do that. Okay, that is what you said?
To the extent that they're allowing it. I mean, it wouldn't necessarily.
For the entirety of the first quarter, the instructional model will be distance learning. Even if, for instance, that kid is in the learning commons because he doesn't have a home environment, he would still be doing distance learning. Even if a student was coming on for small group instruction, they would still be doing distance learning. And to back, you had a question earlier. This model allows the flexibility of if a student or a family does not want to come to school, we are only operating one model, so it's equal for everyone.
Just a calendar question.
Okay, go ahead.
At the end of the quarter, because we have a 4x4 and then we don't have a 4x4.
Oh, good question.
How does that equate for grades? Does it
Well,
matter
all
because it's,
instruction per the state mandate would be graded. And there, you know, the thing is, we have differences in the physical world, and we're going to have differences in the distance learning world. That's so. The 4x4s, the end of the first marking period is a credit earning period, and that's the way it's been for a long, long time.
I've been able to talk to a couple teachers, and I think that quarter, because I know other districts are saying 30 days or, you know, different numbers. The phrase that got used was being able to do their backward planning. If they know to that quarter, then we're not going to wait until the end of the quarter to announce something for the next quarter. We'll be going to be talking about this every 2 weeks, and we'll start looking at what we do beyond at a future date.
thank you. No further questions.
I'll have Joe reiterate who made the motion in the second before the roll call.
All right, then I'm going to call the question if she will do that for us, please, and do the roll call.
The motion was made by Ms. Muir. The second was by Ms. Gibson. And the roll call, starting with Ms. D'Alessandro.
Yes.
Ms. Gibson.
Yes.
Ms. Mossy.
Yes.
Ms. Muir.
Yes.
Ms. Hergesheimer.
Yes.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, everyone. I am going to adjourn this meeting. That was almost 4 hours, so good work sticking it out in front of your computers, and go take a little walk.
Drink some water and take a walk.
Thanks, Rob. Have a good night.
You're welcome. Thank
All
you,
right.
guys. Thank you.
Adjourned.
Yeah.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, presenters and everyone.
Absolutely. Thanks, everybody. All of you. And good job, Rob.